I'm going to call the Tuesday, March 4, 2025 Pembroke School Committee meeting to order. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we did have a couple of people sign in for public comment. I want to remind you, our school committee policy, public comment is for residents, and it is limited to three minutes. It's up to 3 minutes.
It's just 2 minutes in a row.
All right, that's fine. I'll give you guys up to 3 minutes. It's fine. Megan, I know you signed in, but I had sent you an email days ago asking for you to give me a copy of either your statement or the materials so I could distribute them to the committee. I actually wanted to add it not in public comment. I wanted to add it as a topic for discussion for the wider meeting. So I'd ask if you would do that. I would add this as a topic discussion, which means the committee can actually talk about it in a wider way. It's better for you on the 3/18 meeting.
I misunderstood your first email that said if I wasn't a resident, if it was on the agenda, then I could do public comment. I guess I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, I'm actually trying to afford you more time, quite honestly, not less. So on May 18th, I'm happy to put it on. I would just ask that you either provide the statement or materials that you want to present ahead of time, and that way it's a topic for the whole committee to discuss.
So you must be a resident to do public comment?
For public comment, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the first person, I know Katie McPhail, I know you're a resident. So Katie, I'll recognize you. Yeah. Please, you need to come to the microphone so that it gets picked up on TV or on PAC TV or whatever we're calling it today. Sorry. The microphones will not project your voice in the room. It is solely for the recording. I do have just one thing, Katie, to make sure that we're all very, very clear on. And I did this when I first started. I've done this uniformly. So you cannot single out an individual employee. You cannot openly attack an employee. Your comments should be general and not identifiable to an employee. So please go ahead. If they are, I will have to stop you. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name's Katie McPhail. I'm a Pembroke mother of 5. Although I currently have children in 3 of the 5 schools, over the last 17 years, I've had kids attend all 5 schools, ranging from the integrated preschool right through a high school graduate. My children have been blessed with incredibly supportive, loving, and understanding teachers. Our experience has been overwhelmingly positive, and I hope it remains that way until my youngest graduates in 2036. We have dealt with IEPs, 504s, medical and mental illnesses, injuries, and more, all of which have been met with the utmost support of school administration, with the exception of one of my son's experiences at the high school. I debated on speaking for fear of retaliation, but after reading a poem by Kaylin Dion that said, "If you stay silent about the problem to keep the peace, there is 0% chance the problem will get fixed," I knew that was my sign that I needed to share our story. My oldest started at Pembroke High School in 2016. My kids are all 3.5 to 4 years apart, meaning that I will have a student at Pembroke High School from 2016 to 2036. So with 20 consecutive years having students at Pembroke High School, I feel it's important that I speak up for my children and others to prevent this from continuing. My oldest went through 4 years and was not a target of any bullying, and I'm grateful for that. I'm truly happy for all the students and staff that feel seen, supported, and respected at Pembroke High School, but unfortunately there are many, many others that are continuously bullied, intimidated, and harassed. We all know that bullies choose their targets, and we don't always know why they choose who they choose. Unfortunately, one of my sons was chosen and one was not. All bullies, murderers, abusers, rapists, everybody, they don't inflict pain on everyone they know. They have allies, friends, people in their corner that are lucky enough to only see the good and not subject to the bad. But that does not negate the fact that it's happening and happening for way too long. Please listen with an empathetic mind, and I hope you think about how you would feel if this was your child treated this way, or if you were treated like this at your job. This is not just a select few complaining, nor is it a new problem, and evidence can be found dating back many years. There are petitions out there with 792 signatures of students and parents asking for I'm trying to avoid
I
names. so
know
just
you are, and I
bear with me.
appreciate you doing that. Keep trying.
Asking to protect the students from mistreatment and allow them to thrive in a safe and healthy environment. In the last 17 years that I've had students in Pembroke, I have never seen petitions or complaints like this about any other staff members in our school or others. Myself and I have met with members of the school committee and the superintendent with no changes or support and answers. We felt that our boys were being targeted. We all agreed they were constantly harassed, followed around, and spoke to in condescending ways. This was happening on a daily basis. Although us parents are not happy to hear that staff is being treated the same way, we are finally happy to have a voice and support of the teachers union in making the change. My child was a victim, and this is not just a personal issue. It affects every student in our community who deserves to learn in a safe, respectful environment. My child, like many at Pembroke High School, suffers from a mental illness. Despite the fact that 49.5% of adolescents have mental health disorders and 20% of adults experience each year, the high school does not appear to believe or support these emotional disabilities. We were told by one staff member they did not believe in concussions. They constantly undermined not only our doctors, but the very supportive teachers at Pembroke High School who are trying to make accommodations and help my son come past this. We were told that he did not have anxiety. He does not look anxious. When he was struggling to attend school, he was told to try harder and develop some grit. The lack of understanding and support is not only damaging to my child's education, but his overall well-being. It was heartbreaking to see him struggle daily without receiving the help he needed at an institution where he should be fostered for his growth and development. Mental health is as important as physical health, and it's time we start treating it as such. We need our schools to be safe places where all students can thrive regardless of their challenges. Administration at the high school knew his schedule, would be frequently waiting in his classroom, watching him on camera, counting when he went to the bathroom, how long he was in there, how many times a day. This has also been done to staff. He would be called down from class, stopped in the hall, and met as he exited the bathroom, demanding searches. Denying searches results in automatically disciplinary actions. So my son continued to consent to the search. Over the course of 6 months, he was searched dozens and dozens of times without reason and without finding anything. After one search, where again nothing was found, he was told by an administrator, "I know you have friends that smoke, and I've caught them, so I know I will catch you too." He was constantly violated and had a hard time going to and staying in school. He was targeted, and after being frequently called to the office, mostly for being tardy to school, he was beginning to be labeled as a problem. When he started with those frequent tardies and would earn detentions, he would be called from class, further labeling him as a student with a disciplinary problem. He has never once had a disciplinary issue in class. All of his teachers for the past 12 years report that he's a hardworking, smart, engaged student, respectful, and mature. While in the office, getting his tardy detentions, it wouldn't just end there. He would be intimidated, belittled, and badgered about his grades, his sports, his future plan, and basically anything that was going on with his life. It got so bad when he was called to these offices, it had to be put on his 504 that he could not be called to the office without a support person from guidance with him. He was pushed to go to night school, try online school, or drop out and get his GED. Unfortunately, his mental illness does not shut off at home. It also does not shut off at nighttime to go to night school. This was not the course that he wanted or needed. He wanted to be successful at Pembroke High School and go to college. My son was bullied right out of Pembroke High School, where his needs were not met academically or emotionally. He's had out-of-district placement for the last year. He's taking some honors classes, completing a dual enrollment at Massachusetts currently. He's been accepted into several colleges and recruited to play baseball. Yet Pembroke had bullied and harassed him by the staff, not the students. They tried to push him to give up and drop out. Thankfully, I was behind my son as he worked hard to get past this. He is a senior. He's working right now and was unable to come tonight, although he did want to speak, and he wanted me to share his statement. When I first got to high school, I was excited, but soon learned that Pembroke High School was nothing like I had imagined. I was stripped of all my confidence, both socially and academically. I dreaded school and woke up with so much anxiety that I struggled to go, knowing that they were waiting for me. I have never been so mistreated by an adult, let alone an administrator, before attending Pembroke High School. My whole perspective changed. They showed me that the people who should be there to help you are just as capable of hurting you. Thanks to administration, I lost a lot of trust in school authority figures, and I'll never get my time back that should have been some of the best days of my life. I do not wish for any other students, especially my younger siblings, to be treated the way that I was. The superintendent and school committee, please listen to the students and staff who have been treated so poorly, because we deserve better.
Katie, I'm going to ask you to, I'm sorry to do it, but ask you to wrap.
I'm just going to go back to the quote. If you stay silent against the problem to keep the peace, there's 0% chance that the problem will get fixed. Please stand up against bullying and harassment in our school. Please support us, the parents, students, and staff, in demanding justice and preventing it from continuing. I urge other students, parents, and staff to speak up if you've been affected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What's that? Oh, Katie, the superintendent just said if you want to submit your remarks,
They can get the rest of it.
we can, I'm happy to distribute it and make sure the whole committee has it. Okay? Absolutely. Nicole Pelletier?
I actually didn't want to speak tonight.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Angela Ahrens? Angelina, I apologize. Are you, you are a resident, correct?
Yes, I am. Last 10 years, at least. Alrighty, my name's Angelina. My student goes to Hobblemack Elementary School, 6th grade. And I would like to get an answer to a question about what happened this morning here at this school, even though my child is not a student of this school. I'm a mom. What happened this morning at this school with a member of community being loud beyond where parents are allowed to then take pictures and videos of children, unacceptable. I would like clarification on the policy of that. Members of the community were invited this morning to come to all of our schools. They were invited to come to show support for the teachers fighting for our children's education, our children's health with the mold issue. It was here for a show of support. Superintendent Obi did an amazing job with her beautiful email yesterday that I shared with my child so that he wouldn't be scared when he came to school today and saw cops, because that is the world we live in. Our children come to school and see cops, they get scared. So I shared the beautiful worded email that Superintendent Obi said so that he wouldn't be scared. Luckily, he was not at a school this morning where a person did not show up for support, was allowed to be crossing a line that we're told as parents we're not allowed to cross when it comes to parent drop-off. There are specific rules we follow as far as flow of traffic, not disrupting the rest of the children going. It's not a time for chit-chat. It's not a time to talk to our friends as parents, not as other children. We are allowed to get out of our car to get out of our children's equipment if they have special needs, if they're little. It's not a time for us to be holding up the line. We got things to do. You have things to do. Why was a member of our community that was there not for support allowed past that line near our children? And I say this as a mother, not of a mother of a child of this school, but of another school, but in support of the mothers of this school. Why was somebody there allowed, not that they were being allowed to be there, everybody in the community was invited. Yes, it said it was support, but they were all invited. Why were they allowed to take pictures of our children? Why were they allowed to be in an area? What is the policy of that? Why does the policy state that I, as a parent, am not allowed to go 2 feet beyond my car or whatever that distance is? But a man or woman, I'm not going to be sexist about it, but it was a man, because we have pictures, because we're parents, and that's what we do. Why was he allowed where I'm not allowed near our children? What's the policy on that? Why was he allowed to break that policy?
So you've asked the same question multiple times.
Cool, awesome. My question is, what the hell is the policy?
So, no, it's fine. My point is, you've gone past your
Oh,
3
I
minutes,
apologize.
and you asked a question. Do you want to just quickly address this?
Sure, love to.
Since I was not at any of the schools this morning.
So I was at each of the schools. Mary Beth did go to Bryantville because that is the same time as parent drop-off at Hobbamock, and I was at Hobbamock. As you stated, the community was invited to participate this morning. That is not something that we would get in between who was invited, who's able, all of the reasons that you stated.
You
right?
did beautifully in your emails,
Yep. So-
specifically making sure that we knew exactly what we were allowed to do and what we
So
weren't.
our campuses are open to the public over the course of the school day, right? So you are not allowed access to our building during the student day, but there are many times where people are walking their dogs on school campuses, whether it's Hobbamock, the middle school here at North, while students are in class and at recess. Community is allowed on the property during the student day.
Community is not allowed to come onto school property and take pictures of children. I'm 90% sure that's a felony.
Correct. So, again, our campuses are open, the community is allowed to be on those campuses. To enter our building, as you alluded to in your statement, requires a different level of, authorization, right? So we have Raptor systems at each of our buildings. Anyone entering the building must present a license. That license is scanned before they're given access. As far as taking pictures, students are entitled to a reasonable expectation of privacy while they are in our care. You can do what you want with that in the sense that we obviously have a list of students that are on a no photo list. So if I'm in a second grade classroom taking a group photo, I need to be aware of who in that classroom is on a no photo list before I post the photo to the Pembroke Public Schools Facebook page or anything like that. If your child is on a sporting team at Pembroke High School and another parent in the audience takes a photo of an event happening, it is possible that your student may be captured in that photo, even though that wasn't the intent of the photo. This morning, as you said earlier, there was a member of the community that was here. They were not disrupting traffic. They were not interrupting student drop-off. Mr. Murphy was also present this morning. He went over to that community member and just reminded them that this was not a political event happening at our schools. That individual wanted to take a photo to document the staff, the adults that were participating in the event. He can do that. There were also representatives from the Massachusetts Tutor Association taking photos at all of our schools as well.
But what's the policy when it comes to why is the public allowed to be where our children are and we are not?
So there's no policy that says you as a parent can't step onto the sidewalk when you're
No,
getting your kid out of the car. The community member was standing on the sidewalk by the clothing recycle bin on the right side of the building. They were not in the flow of students entering the building. They were not standing between the student and the building. They were absolutely there, which is their right as a community member to document the participation in the event this morning. There's not a policy that could prohibit us from that whatsoever.
So
hold on. So this isn't a debate, right? You asked a question, the question was answered. The only other thing I'm going to add to you is when you open these things up to the public, this is a potential outcome of opening those things up to the public. I think everyone around this table, especially in the administration, does their best to be fair and objective to how that happens. And knowing that he wasn't the only one taking pictures, both of those people would have had to have been removed if someone was going to be removed. So your question's been asked, it's been answered. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Rhonda, Rosanna? Rhonda, I've known you for a long time. I know you're a
How are you
Pembroke
this
resident.
evening?
Good, how are you?
Nice to see you again. So my name is Rhonda Rosano. I live here in Pembroke. For the last 12 years, I've had 3 children, all different elements of learning capabilities. One that graduated with high honors, one that is in the special district program for special needs. And then my last is my son, who's graduating this year. So as you said, I'm going to have to sit there and take out some
Yep,
names
please.
because I didn't realize that we
No, that's
weren't
okay.
allowed to
I
do that.
appreciate
So
it.
please bear with me. 3.5 years ago, as my son is going to be a senior and he'll be graduating this year, and please note that I am all about transparency and the truth. In the first month of my son attending PHS, I met with a team of his teachers and some of the administration disclosing what we were going through that summer prior to him entering PHS within our home. He was diagnosed with having depression, anxiety, and ODD. With all three of those, it is a tornado. In his freshman year, my son was suspended the first time for 13 days, and he was given his first manifestation meeting. Later on in the year, he was also suspended for 7 days. Going into his sophomore year, due to the infractions that my son received during his freshman year, he became a target of the administration. My son struggled with mental health and a disorder and worked extremely hard to overcome his triggers, learning how to cope and maneuver throughout his day in a positive manner. Despite the overwhelming hard work done on his behalf, the administration continued to harass and bully my son. They would track him on cameras throughout the day and taking note of his bathroom breaks. One time, he was accused of intentionally displaying an alleged sexual hand sign on his class picture, which I never ordered, I never received a copy of, and I never saw it. Please forgive me. This led to an investigation, or what they call a drill down, by one in particular administrator on 2 separate occasions, one which I was witness to. Her intense and repetitive questioning over and over again resulted in the same outcome, with my son stating that he did not know that the sign had a sexual meaning. This administrator further pressed, asking why. Why this day? Why this picture? Please explain to me. Please explain your reasoning for this. Again and again, my son answered her exactly the same. Eventually, I had to stop the questioning of him due to the unnecessary interrogation, harassment, intimidating, and bullying that I saw. After putting a stop to the berating of my son, this administrator told us that my son would be suspended. She informed us that she did not believe my son and that his intentions were on purpose. I asked further how she was able to determine that my son was lying and not telling the truth, and what made her judge and jury. She responded with, "The day that I got this job," quote unquote. In addition, my son was later given another suspension for allegedly being in possession of illegal drugs, under the influence, refusal to comply with staff request, and refusal for search. It was deemed an immediate 48 hours of removal from school because of a threat to all students. My husband and I automatically gave him a drug test at home, which came back negative. And we waited 48 hours, 2 days, so that the drugs would get into his system so that we could prove that he was under the influence. At this time, I received several documents indicating the removal of my son from the school, along with instructions of when a hearing of suspension and manifestation meeting would be conducted. Because administration did not report the true version of the events that transpired that day, I decided to hire a lawyer. In addition, I was denied access to the video footage to see who was in the vestibule, a written statement from the administration of the incident, and the right to produce witnesses on behalf of my son. In conclusion, my son's manifestation meeting was scheduled for February 17th, which was almost a month later from the date that he was caught, supposedly, allegedly caught, in the vestibule smelling like marijuana. At that point, the day before, the day before the manifestation meeting, I was told that they would not conduct the manifestation meeting because they calculated incorrectly the number of days that my son was suspended for. Because by law, you have to be suspended for 10 days for the manifestation meeting, and they went over 11, a full month. But when you attend a hearing, at your fingertips you have your laptop and a hard copy of your child's file. And inside that file, you have a documentation of your child's grades and the attendance. And with the documentation that I received from administration says that there would be a manifestation meeting held because the person that conducts the manifestation meeting was not available on that Monday following the suspension. She was only available on Tuesday. Anyways, please excuse me because I know that we have to leave names out.
No, and Rhonda, I am going to ask you to wrap up just because of time.
Yep. So as I said, I have documentation to supporting this. So anyways, starting from the top to the bottom, the department knows that this is not correct and that if this was the way, they have the documentations that states that my son was entitled to his manifestation meeting and that if we're able, this is why I do not trust the administration here, and if they're able to blatantly cover up something like this, what else are they willing to cover up, misrepresent, fabricate, or mislead us on? When speaking to the top of the administration about this matter, her response was, people make mistakes, not at the cost of my son's education and not at the cost of his well-being and his mental health. This behavior has been going on far too long, and it needs to stop now before more students and staff are harmed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So, both Katie and Rhonda, I just want to say thank you for going through, doing your best to actually do what I asked. So I greatly appreciate it. Greg Getz, so, are you a resident?
Full disclosure, I'm not a resident, but I would like to point out that the speaker's rules that I read repeatedly only use the word citizen in it throughout, which is kind of ambiguous.
That's fine. It is, I am the chairman of the committee, and I have always put this to residents, right? So that is my prerogative.
I've never attended a meeting before.
That's okay.
I've not spoken out like this, so I was just
Okay.
wondering about that.
What I will say, though, and this is really important, right? This is not meant to quash any voice, because candidly, this is meant for residents of the town to be able to address the committee with their concerns, which I think we just very fairly and openly did. If you aren't a resident and you would like to put something on the agenda or have consideration for it to be put on the agenda, you can email the school committee mailbox. I will take it under consideration. It does not guarantee that it goes on the agenda, right? I want to be clear about that. But
There's a 10-day notification period.
there is, yes. So I am always happy to look at something and consider something, right? So there is an avenue for your voice to be heard. So thank you. There were no other speakers that were signed in. I think we've acknowledged the visitors at this point. I am glad you're here. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? So under communications, which is actually why I wanted this to be specifically listed, right? In the spirit of full transparency, and it actually gave you all the ability to give us your thoughts and your comments on this community forum that was heard on 2/27. I sat here about a month and a half ago, and I said that I was going to make sure that the residents of this town had a truthful, unbiased, and transparent discussion of the things that were happening within this school district and around this committee table. And thus far, I think we have done a pretty good job at that. I attended the 227 Community Forum, and I didn't say anything, I just listened. And candidly, the superintendent was there, the assistant superintendent was there, and the vice chairman of the school committee was there. We attended because...
And the clerk.
Oh, sorry, no, and the clerk, you're right, was there. And we attended because the topic was crisis in Pembroke Public Schools. And I went and I listened. And it opened up with a listing of grievances. It opened up with a listing of actions. Problem is, it starts with a shred of truth. A shred of truth. And then it expands out to a fabrication and a delusion that clearly never happened. I sat there, and had I not been at the meeting that was referred to, I would never know it was the same meeting. So the president of the PTA had a discussion about our first bargaining session, which I would never have a public discussion about because those things are usually done in executive session. But given that we don't have ground rules, and given that this was talked about publicly, I feel every right to respond. The president of the PTA said that, and this is the truthful part, that meeting lasted for 25 minutes, at which point the parties broke. That is true, 100% accurate. Here's where it goes off the rails. She then indicated that all as the union was doing was giving an explanation of their first proposal. I mean, you would have thought that it was flowers and sunshine. It wasn't. What happened in the explanation of the proposal, which is not actually, in my view, guaranteed, bargaining takes many forms. This is not interest-based bargaining, and that was well known going in. But an explanation is 100% appropriate so everyone understands what is being asked for. The MTA rep tried to adjudicate a grievance that the superintendent had just denied. And the fierce, and I would venture to say salacious language that was used against a member and an employee of this district was uncalled for, especially at a first meeting when normally what you do is ground rules. At which point both myself and our attorney intervened and said, this is inappropriate. By all means, you can tell us your story, but you cannot adjudicate a grievance. You okay?
Oh, no.
Okay. You're welcome to leave.
I'm listening.
Okay, thank you.
Not with you.
I'm not arguing with you, and this is my meeting. We told her that she cannot adjudicate a grievance at that point in time, at which point they asked to break, and we broke. I then went and instructed the attorney that we would not be returning to that meeting, and that could he please go back and get any further proposals. And at that point, the rep explained that she was allowed to do that, she had every right to do that, and our attorney never said he did not have the authority to bargain. If he didn't have the authority to bargain, he would not have been at that table. That was one issue. Second issue that was brought up was specifically about me. So a couple months ago, when one of those grievances had to be postponed because it was requested by the association to be postponed, the administration did their best to reschedule it in a very quick manner because they were asked to do so. When they did that, they said that they had a time box in order to have the people present that needed to be present. As I understand that, that was agreed to. The day before, we were told that was not acceptable. As I understand it, there was a communication that went out to union representation. That communication did not stay within union representation. It was made public, and it was sent to me. And I posted something on my personal page, because at that point, it's a public document. It's not about there not being truth. It is not about what I said was untruthful. It's about the fact that I posted it. I disagree that that was inappropriate. The next thing that I want to talk about is how much chaos is being ensued. I've talked to 3 different labor attorneys, and all 3 labor attorneys have told me that this is 100% the playbook. See, the people that sit around this table are volunteers. They're just regular residents. They are not labor attorneys. Most of the time, they're not even attorneys. They're moms and dads that are here to do well for their children. And that's preyed upon. It's been harassing. It has been absolutely inundate you with as much as we can. And it is meant to make sure that these people are intimidated. And it is inappropriate. We spent, and I started in this committee in 2007, and I started on a parent advisory committee in 2004. So I've been involved with public education in this town for 21 years. I've never seen this before. We've always had a very good relationship with the Pembroke Teachers Association. And I will emphasize something because I think it has to be emphasized. The vast majority of teachers come to work every single day. You will not be recognized. Sit down.
You've mentioned me by name
I don't care. I
several
under
times.
no
I know you said you
circumstances
weren't going to
will
do that.
recognize you. Sit down. And if I have to, I will call the police and I will have you removed. Sit down.
This is why we have the ULPs. This is why.
Having said that,
It's not untrue.
having,
It's all factual. What
ha-
you're hearing now is misleading.
having said that, we also have a series of rights and responsibilities. We do not have to be intimidated. We do not have to be threatened. And we,
sit here and listen to this.
then you can leave.
You're not telling the truth.
And this is my meeting. You may leave.
No, it's not. This is a community meeting. It is not your meeting.
I am the chairman of this meeting. You may
You are
leave.
the chairperson. You are that one person.
The public comment is over.
Responsible to the public. Shame on you.
Convenient that it's over.
Having said that, the chaos that has been that has literally been thrown out to this community is unacceptable. The second thing that we have been asked over and over and over and over again is why haven't you responded to a couple of these things? And the reason that we haven't responded to some of these things is we are going to go into a grievance hearing. And we have to go in with an open mind, which I most certainly will do. Because I can promise you, if somebody broke the law that is an employee of this organization and is an employee of this district, that will be dealt with. However, every employee deserves to have the exact same process portrayed with them. Last year, we had a teacher who had a tremendous amount of complaints levied against them. This same process was put forward. That is not the first time. We have done our best to make sure that the process that has been used is the same process over and over again. And I guarantee you that if it was found that an employee either meets the legal standard of harassment or unsafe working environment, that will be dealt with. The last thing I'm going to say, because I do have 21 years in this community and I do have 21 years in this district. However, I am bound by certain things sitting behind this table. There is an election on May 17th, and you all know I am not running for re-election. At which point I will become a private citizen. I will no longer be bound by the things that I'm bound for, and I cannot in any way influence or shape anything that happens between the union and this committee. So I will be more than happy to have a conversation side by side with a representative of the union of what the past 20 years in this organization have looked like, publicly. Anytime after May 18th, because at that point, we are on a level playing field. It is fair. But I am not going to sit by and have the superintendent threatened, have any member of this administration threatened, and most certainly have any member of this body threatened. And all the outbursts in the world don't matter to me. Because right's right and wrong's wrong. And those are my comments on the forum. We have bills that are making their way through. And it's really not, and Rhonda, I'm sorry. I can't let you, and then having said no to the others that got up, it would be unfair. So, thank you. So we do have our two state representatives, Representative Sweezy, Representative Lenatra, and Senator Fernandez at the table. I truly do appreciate you being here. I know we have some questions for you on sort of the current state of things up on Beacon Hill, but we have maybe, I know the governor's budget's out, I know you guys are working very hard on your budget. Maybe you could initially share with us kind of some of the goings on and some of the things that you are seeing, and you know, maybe take a couple questions from us.
Sure.
That's okay?
Do you want to start, Senator, or you want me to start?
Go right ahead.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Can you hear me with this okay? So, as you said, I'm Kathy Lenatra. I represent Precinct 3 here in Pembroke, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Representative Sweezy, who represents the rest of Pembroke, and Senator Dylan Fernandez, who represents the entirety of Pembroke as well. So, as you said, the governor has dropped her budget. We get it next at the House, and we're looking at that. Rep. Sweezy and myself, and he can speak for himself too, have been in several briefings about Chapter 70. We're looking into reforming Chapter 70 this year. We've, it's fifth year of the Student Opportunity Act. Hopefully that'll be fully funded this year as well. Additional monies in the Fair Share Amendment. We're hoping some of those additional monies will go towards the schools. I represent 6 towns. A lot of them have a deficit in their school budget, and we're looking to address that. Do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, just I'd say, you know, being newer still, I think there's a lot of optimism up on Beacon Hill about the prospect of maybe amending or looking at Chapter 70 pretty closely this year. Pembroke is far from unique in the sense that Chapter 70 is not quite up to snuff and fulfilling the needs of the district. I think all 5 of my communities as well, maybe 4 of them are looking at potential overrides just based on school budgets and how that fits in. I've filed some legislation, and I know the rep and senator have as well. Desi at the time couldn't get me numbers before bill filing about the financial impact to the state, but the inflation cap has been a particular area of everyone's interest because that would sort of lift everyone up evenly and affect all districts. Right now it's capped at 4.5%, which, as we know, the last couple of years we were hit really hard and basically, for lack of better terms, stole money from towns. When it was, you know, in 2021, 22 and beyond, well above 4.5%, almost double that at times. That was a particular problem, and there's no way to catch up because when inflation is back down at 2 or 3%, it does not allow you to go up to that 4.5. So you never really get to make up for that money that's lost. So there's a really keen group of people that are looking at that in particular. I was actually on a briefing for that specific issue, and there's some legislation filed by others as well that would just flat out do it even without the study being done that I called for. So that's a particular interest about Chapter 70 as the budget goes on. I know there's a lot to talk about as far as transportation and special education reimbursements and stuff like that. Again, this is something that a lot of people are looking at, so that's sort of my focus, and I know overlaps quite a bit. My colleagues as well. I know you have legislation.
Yeah.
So.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. Quite the meeting.
We promise it's not
I gotta
like this every
come.
time.
I gotta come more often.
She's not in I would say that's true.
Well,
Tuesday nights in Pembroke. Well,
yeah. Hey, this is. Well, look, it's an honor to represent this community, and you know, I think, you know, I think we have some education challenges in this state, but like macro view, I'm really proud to be in Massachusetts. We do rank above everyone else in the nation on every score. And this scorecards that just came out, it was a clean sweep for Massachusetts public schools. I think we should be proud of that. We're the one state, I think, where actually education's enshrined in our Constitution. And it's something we deeply value. Kathy and I were around for the Student Opportunity Act, and of course supported that. Biggest infusement of money into public schools in 20 plus years. It's my view, though, that while it was a bill where a rising tide raises all ships, some got a little higher than others, even though
The urban districts got a little higher.
all of
than
them were raised,
everybody.
which was intentional,
Right.
right? This wasn't something that wasn't intentional. I mean, urban district, gateway cities, if you will, which is a MGL definition, they got significantly more money, which is, I think that will be the case still. Like, they will get more money. They're significantly poorer. They have significantly more challenges. They will get more money, but we need to close that gap and just how much more they're getting, right? And and have more reimbursement to communities that look like ours. That's something I really care about across this district. We have some big challenges, and so as Rep. Lenatra and Rep. Sweezy mentioned, this is a really good time to be having this conversation. We're taking up Chapter 70 this year. It's one of the bright spots in the Massachusetts budget, actually, is education funding and transportation funding exclusively because of the Fair Share Amendment that was passed a few years ago. This is actually a place where we have some money to hopefully, and we're going to be pushing forward to go for towns like Pembroke and towns that look like Pembroke, which are the towns that we represent, to close that really kind of glaring, what I see as an equity gap in the gateway cities versus our communities that look like ours. So we have some time, right? We're just 2 months into the session. Committees just formed. Chairs have just been appointed to committees. Kathy and I are both chairing a committee. Ken's on several good committees. So the education, the bill is going to go through the process. So we got some time to work on this. Yeah. I think in that time, it would be helpful to know from the school district, what tweaks we need to make to Chapter 70, which buckets we need to change to make sure that you guys are getting the most reimbursement. That would be really helpful for us to know early, it doesn't have to be immediate, but in the next couple of months, so that we can advocate for. Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll be here next Tuesday based upon the meetings here. But so look, committees have been appointed, 6,000 bills have been filed. Every bill gets a hearing. Hearings will probably start this summer on some of the tweaks to Chapter 70. But we want to make sure that Pembroke has a voice in that process. So just sometime between now and then, giving us the figures that we need to best advocate for you guys would be really helpful. There's likely also to be a supplemental budget between now and the budget, but even before House goes first, Senate Senate goes after. Even before the House takes up the budget, there's likely to be a supplemental Chapter 70 budget. It's not huge transformational items like we think we're going to take up with Chapter 70 reform, but another way to possibly get money maybe for smaller projects, something to think about in terms of amendment filing for us. So
can you quantify when you say smaller, like dollar value? Because
I
don't want to go to you and be like, that sounds small. Right?
Yeah, we'll follow up with guidance on it, but it's usually in the small 50 to 100,000
perfect
range. But it depends on the supplemental budget. Every sub's different. This sub is just is just going to be focused on schools. And it's not like the regular budget, which is a really large kind of piece.
Yep.
So if that's, yeah. But we should chat more about that, and happy to give more guidance there. But look, just to say it's an honor to represent this community, and we look forward to being your partner on this.
Thank you. How about questions for the representatives?
I have
Go ahead.
All right, so I'll start off with VOTEC. So first of all, thank you, all three of you, for being here. It's great that you were all able to make it, and I know the community really appreciates it. So for, I know that, Tracy Marino, our select board chair, has reached out, and, we're hoping that we can have a meeting on the side, and we've already started the conversation. But in the meantime, are there any sort of in a community member, I should get to back up a little bit. A community member reached out and wanted to make sure that she had listened to the select board meeting, and she wanted to make sure that you knew, I'm sure you already do know, that we don't have any access to vocational education in this town. So we're one of the anomalies around this area. A lot of people are in a district where we don't have access. And so it's really important to the town, but it's very expensive. And we're wondering if there's any kind of grant funding or anything anywhere to help us, because we're going to be looking at a debt exclusion, so, debt override. So it's going to be, if we decide to move forward with the VOTAC, it's going to be significantly expensive for our town. And we're already, struggling a little. So just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
My initial thought is that it would be great to get exactly what the numbers look like, because then we can kind of have a more accurate conversation around what your potential options are. I just don't know enough about X reimbursement for X number of students. And then also I think you have to reach certain agreements too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
we're
seems like a broad
well.
conversation.
So I think South Shore VOTAC went to their member towns. They voted on a new building recently. That passed. You guys would obviously know about it because some of your towns that you represent are part of those member communities. Pembroke is looking to potentially join South Shore VOTAC, which would mean the debt exclusion override would end up being our portion of their new school, but then the tuition component to it for the kids that ultimately get sent there. So one of the gaps that's kind of missed sometimes, right, whether it be with special education or vocational education, is the difference between our per pupil funding and the tuition. And that gap has to be bridged, right? That gap has to be closed locally. Yes, circuit breaker is in there and it helps, and some of those things help, but the reality is it puts an immense burden on the community to have to go out and fund that. So I think as we're starting down this path or starting down this journey, that's one consideration as you're thinking of Chapter 70 and how that might work to figure out what could we do there, right? Those special ed and voc ed are in essence unfunded mandates to us, right? We have to give the free and fair public education, thank God, to every child, but there's an economic reality to that that can be really burdensome for the community.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we're going to be looking at, operational costs, and we have to replenish the stabilization fund. So there's going to be a lot of costs along the way that are, if we chose as a town to join. So.
Can I just ask a question about that? So if the town does choose to join, is there a cap on how many students can attend?
You want to answer?
Right, so we would be afforded about 11 to 13% of the enrollment, so it would be about 20 to 21 students per year. So after 4 years of enrollment, we could have up to 84 students as part of this, the capacity being 750 or so of the building at that time.
And, sorry, just another follow-up question on that.
Sorry.
So Silver Lake is out, you're not?
So
Why-
Silver
what
Lake is our
happened there?
school of preference as
Correct.
outlined in some of the Chapter 74 regulations, but they have not accepted any of our students.
Because they have a waiting list of the...
Because they have waiting lists
Okay,
in their
all
member
right, so I just want to make sure,
towns.
it's because they have a waiting list, it's not any other
Correct, and we
reason.
can't, I guess you could, but we purposely separated from Silver Lake, so I don't think the conversation is about rejoining Silver Lake for vocational opportunity, which is why we looked at both South Shore Tech, Upper Cape Cod, Bristol, Plymouth, just looking at any vocationals that are around us to see. There's several that have had new buildings in the past couple of years that have increased their student capacity, so looking and reaching out to those communities to see if anyone's interested in bringing on new members. At this point, South Shore Tech is one of the only ones that's really interested in bringing on new members.
So up to you. Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I'd seen, Rep. Lenatra, I believe you were looking at a bill to increase the special education reserve funds, was that right? From 2 to 5%, so that's fantastic. This is questions for everybody. You know, Massachusetts, not specifically Pembroke, was recently found to not meet some requirements of IDEA, so clearly as a state, some of the ways in which we provide special education need to be improved. So just wondering what specifically your ideas are for special education beyond that, which is great, to meet the needs of our students.
You know what, so I'll start with that. Just is how many students do you are out of district? Do you know offhand that are out of district?
Jess, you will know.
In the low 30s.
In the low 30s.
34, I think.
And are most of those from the elementary, or
It
no?
varies.
It varies. So there was another bill that I filed relative to the special education reserve, what you just said, right?
Yeah.
And then there is a bill filed that we are sponsors on. It's for long-term fiscal health and sustainability for special education. So what this one does, I have to put my glasses on for it, sorry, is to, so it's reimbursed for the circuit breaker from 75% to 90%, but it also lowers the threshold. And that's from Rep. Hawkins, that we just learned about today, because we were in a briefing today, that we're going to, I've co-sponsored so far, but I know that you just learned about it today as well, Rep. Sweezy. So there's a lot of legislation that's filed around the special education, the circuit breaker, to reimburse more. Just from having friends that are educators, and I'm not an educator, I know that her school has brought in some things, so they didn't have to bring students out of district, and they were like simple things, children that had a hearing impairment, and they were sending their students out of the district, but it was just a simple thing that was $16,000, and now they're taking in students from other schools. Like, so sometimes there's like little things that can save money there, and then you also save with transportation too. Transportation is the largest cost. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's more than sending your child, your student out.
I was going to bring that up, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
transportation's-
transportation there, it used to be vocational transportation too. We can't send anyone anywhere, so that's not as much of an issue, but the transportation cost is extensive. That's exactly
And that
right.
happened over COVID.
Yes.
Yeah, we lost
But-
a lot of companies.
Yeah, and I would say it was a big number for us before, but it's gotten worse.
It is. There is a bill that Rep. Lay has filed. It's very intense, and it has a lot to do with transportation. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm happy to send that to you.
That would be
too.
great. Thank you. Other questions?
So our level service maintenance of effort budget, since I've been on the committee, we're never getting that much money. So every year we are having to cut from what we start with every year, whether we are cutting, enrollment reductions, whatnot. So for us to try to bring in a program like that, what are we losing? That's kind of how this works out for us. So for instance, our maintenance of effort for FY26 is almost $41 million. The town can only give us short 900,000. So we're having to close that gap and still run the district. So, I understand that you guys are all just kind of, getting into where you are, but we have to pass a budget for town meeting in May, and we have to close this gap. And that's a lot. I'm new at this. I know, the sky's not falling, but as you've heard, there's a lot happening right now. And we are number one in the country. How much longer can we do that if we're going to have class sizes continuing to rise? I'm sorry, this is just, it's, I have 4 kids in the district. I have 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 2 at the high school. And I have seen presentations on wanting to bring in social emotional programs. I've seen wanting to bring in foreign language in the elementary schools. Last year we had to get rid of library at the 3 elementary schools. We've kind of adjusted a little bit for that, but we need help. Like, I know I'm one of the newer ones here, but we can't, the town only has so much money that we can levy. Special education tuition costs my understanding is there's no cap to them, what they can charge us. So if somebody moves into town, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars to send that child.
Sometimes
which
it
we
is,
have
yeah.
a moral and legal obligation to that child. But we also have the same responsibility for every other student that walks through our door. So I know the sky's not falling, but it feels like that to a lot of us parents who have kids that are not having the STEM, not having the class sizes that we're used to, not having potentially as many foreign languages at the high school. So anything that can happen from your guys' end, like yesterday, really. So that's kind of
Yeah, I mean, I just say that, I mean, now is the right time to be having these conversations. And again, it would be really helpful because, it's not often that we actually tweak Chapter 70.
Right.
It was like a couple decades since we did the last time where it was tweaked in an actual, like, really meaningful way. But there's broad agreement that it's something that needs some changing now or soon, this session, right? So, like, the train is moving, if you will, and
I'm on.
if we,
I'll hop on.
and
I'm
so,
there.
and so that's why, I mean, we want to champion Pembroke, and so it'd just be really helpful if you guys could give us, like, concrete specifics
we'll do that.
on, IEP reimbursements, on technology costs, on transportation
replacements.
issues. You name
Tell you all
it.
of
The
it.
things that how you'd like to see those tweaks, so that we can be your champion for this. And of course, we're up against a lot too. There's not so much on the Senate side, but I come from the House, and that there's 40 plus members from the city of Boston in the House.
That's
or
right,
something,
right.
right? So we're also up against a lot, which is why the more ammunition we can get from you guys on to best advocate for the town, the more helpful it is.
And one thing I want to point out is that coalition is what made us not have vocational access that we were having despite being out of district, is because they changed, 3-4 years ago, where they now have to take students within their region before they can take anybody else. And so that's why I think we might have less than a dozen seniors in VOTEC, and that's almost it, except for going out to the Aggie at this point. So there's just so many layers to this, but when it comes to infrastructure, facilities, personnel, the money from COVID helped, and that's gone. So we're, having to keep up with still running a district. So I know we have a lot of stuff on our website for budget stuff, and Aaron's a whiz and can definitely hopefully get you guys more specifics, but
To that point,
we need
when do
help.
you need the info, what would be ideal to get, is there a timeline we're looking at where this is going to be a major discussion?
So just bill filing first 2 weeks of January, committees got set last week. Then every bill gets a hearing between now and Joint Rule 10 Day, which we're figuring out when Joint Rule 10 Day is, but it's likely going to be around this time next year. So essentially every bill should get a hearing within the next year. Hearings will likely start in summer. It will really get going in summer and spring too. So, I think between now and when the House kicks off their budget, in an ideal world, it would be good to get that information.
By the beginning of April, to give you a deadline. I would say the beginning of April would be
That'd be
helpful for
helpful.
me.
Yeah, all right,
And
thank
Representative
you.
Sweezy.
I think what might help you guys, right, if we as a committee thought about this in 3 different ways, right? And I'm just going to throw it out there for us to think about. I think on the supplemental side, right, what are the short-term things? So if there were things that we could bring together as a district and our legislative contingent was able to get us $100,000 or say $150,000. What could we do on all of the requests that we have where we could buy it and, you know, you could have the benefit now as well as the benefit going into next year for that. That's one thing on the supplemental. I think then there's a second ask, the social emotional program that we've talked about, I think is a great one. It's a great one. I think it has a lot of champions. We'll have a lot of champions in the legislature where we're talking about trying to establish a new elementary program that would bring kids back into district, right? Bring them back to their home schools, bring them back with their siblings and with their families, but there's startup costs with that. The beautiful thing about startup costs is they're one-time costs, right? Which are a little bit easier, I think, as we're going through the budget cycle to get to. Then there's a longer-term strategy around Chapter 70, right? When I read the article in the Globe a couple weeks ago, my jaw dropped. I never thought I was going to see this happen, you know, again. The worst school committee meeting, believe it or not, that I've ever been in was one where we actually had someone for about an hour and a half do a Chapter 70 point by point by point. I mean, we were head bobbing. It was rough. But the fact that this does have legs a little bit, and I'm a little surprised myself, we should capitalize on it. So to your point, what would help you guys, right, as you advocate for Pembroke and the other communities you represent? I think if we can bucket that and get it to you, it would be helpful. That program on the elementary side, the reason I think that could be really important is the one-time funding could become revenue generating and could be cost avoidance going forward, right? So you're incrementing revenue, you're lowering your expense base, all because there was a one-time cost infusion, and you're bringing kids with needs back home. I mean, it's like gold. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the presentations that all the programs did and weighing what the priorities are when looking at all the programs and getting that to them at the beginning of April sounds good.
I do think the vocational piece is another thing just to think through, though, right?
Yes.
Is because there are so few slots available, and this is a longer-term strategy, right? If we're really going to focus on education, we desperately need more people in the trades, right? And not every kid is meant to go to college and will be wildly successful in life being in the trades. How do we, as communities, and how do we, as state government, actually bring that forward and help make the right investments to get more vocational possibilities established throughout the Commonwealth? I almost think of it as, how do we take the CBHC behavioral health model and bring it to vocational education, right? One-stop shopping for education in a regionalized way that is supported at a state level would be, I think, awesome, allowing more access, more capability, you know, that type of thing, so.
And we're having a meeting on that on the 25th, and you're welcome to come.
Yeah, that's it, you guys are welcome.
And we'll have a lot of numbers by then.
Yeah.
Well, if I can send people.
No, seriously, I think that's great. David, thoughts, questions?
No, first I want to say thank you for coming, and it was kind of, I don't say put together in short notice, but trying to juggle the 3 schedules you guys have was amazing that we got all 3 of you, and I'm grateful for that. I would also say please come again, not for the fireworks or for the craziness, but it's actually, it means a lot. I think that the people in town have a lot of questions. I think mine's probably a little more of a comment than a question, because we've talked about, you know, the transportation, the funding, and all that type of stuff. But I've always, and in full disclosure, I worked on the Hill back in the early 80s for the Committee on Healthcare. And what I've always found is the perception of what the people read in the newspapers. And, you know, what I'm saying, like, respectfully, your budget's supposed to be done June 30th, and all of a sudden we're signing it on August 4th or something or other, and you're saying, what example do we send to our kids to whatever, like, don't worry about the budget, just do the 30th, we'll get it to you by August 1st. That, to me, is kind of crazy. And again, I know you guys have little to no say about this stuff, but the perception it puts out to the community You know, every time we talk about something with the schools, the first thing someone says to me is, well, down in Kingston, they're all staying in that hotel, and we're spending millions of dollars, and, you know, it opens up the can of worms. And, you know, I don't have a good answer for them sometimes. It's, but, you know, I'm going to go back and say thank you. And I think you heard our concerns. I think you've heard some of the folks here's concerns. And I think we'll get there. We'll have some numbers for you and moving forward.
So last word is going to our student representative, who is the future of Massachusetts. Ryan, any questions you want to ask these guys?
Well, I was looking to know what exactly Chapter 70 was, but I do think I figured
Ryan.
it out.
I can spend some time with you if you want.
What are you doing for next week, Ryan?
Overall, I mean, I believe, obviously, thank you all for coming. You're all working very hard. You know that. I think, I mean, you all know the numbers. Infinite more times than me. So, because I meant 0.
No, you guys asked really good questions. I went for the elementary one when I met with you guys last month. You guys kept me on my toes.
Thank you. I've not many comments as much as just a simple thank you, and I
No, that's
hope
good.
you'll get it all sorted.
So,
Us too.
Thank you.
I applaud you guys for coming and taking questions and then giving us homework to do for you.
Yeah.
It's the best meeting that you can walk out of in that regard, right? So thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it. You do not have to stay. I know how busy you all are for the remainder of our meeting, but thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure.
Take care.
And keep
Thank
in
you.
touch. And I have office representatives here as well, and we want to keep a strong dialogue on this, so keep in touch. Thank you.
We'll give Phoebe a shout out. Very,
Yeah, this next part's definitely important.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you again.
Okay, superintendent's report. We are going to defer teaching and learning, is that correct?
If for some reason the conversation, presentation, and related Q&A on air quality and mold is shorter than we're anticipating, then by all means, we can dive right into the teaching and learning budget. Those slides are in your packet and were shared with you, but if after this piece completes, if you all want to just table it to the next meeting, that is also understandable as well.
So go ahead, Erin.
So I have purposely positioned the television set so that you all in the audience can see the slides that I'm presenting. The school committee and those at the table have full-page versions of the slides. So hopefully I can see it well enough to be clicking in line with what I'm saying. I do want to front load with a couple of things. First of all, this will be on our website following tonight's meeting. There is an incredible amount of information in this presentation. There was at no point an effort to not include something, to glaze over something, to pretend as if something didn't happen. Every single document that is on our website is linked to this presentation as well. Wherever it's read, it's a link, and you can click on it and see the full information. I got some feedback after a parent Q&A back last March that I had purposely cut off a footnote. I assure you I'm going to front load tonight and say I have not purposely left anything off of the slides. I have done my best to fit them in the parameters of the slides, but again, every single document is fully linked as well for those that want to dive deeper into this. With that being said, a tremendous amount of work has happened in regards to air quality here in the district. I see a couple of folks in the audience. I see Tim Kennedy back there. Tim has been working with us as the bargaining chair for the entirety of the duration of this process. You know, a lot of great work has happened, and I just want to make sure that that comes across as well. Here we go. So I think you're gonna do a Q&A after, or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there will be a brief Q&A after, yes.
So there's 37 slides here that are full of words, which are my least favorite type of slides to present. I'm not going to read every word on every page, but please know my attempt is to kind of cover what has been done, some historical information, and again, these slides are meant to stand on their own on the website for folks that weren't able to be here tonight or not able to see the recording. So
And to be clear, these will all be up on the website.
they're ready to go, and it'll hit publish in the morning. So again, I'm going to just give a little bit of an overview of, I didn't want to, an overview of all the different types of HVAC systems in our schools, the timeline of the concerns that have been shared at Havamock, some of the reports, the results, the recommendations, the remediation steps that have been taken to date, as well as some potential next steps for us as a district, as well as a community. So a couple of questions that I've heard in the past is, why is this an issue at Hobbamock? It seems like we hear about Hobbamock more than we hear about the other buildings. So I just wanted to take a minute and share with you all the different types of HVAC systems in our schools. So North Pembroke, the building you're in right now, Bryantville, and the middle school each have a univent system. That means every single classroom is almost its own system, right? So the push in and exhaust is controlled by one unit in the room. They take in a certain amount of outside air within the room. It's all meant to be a closed system for the room. Pembroke High School has air conditioning, which is unique for our building. So an air conditioning HVAC system is much different than a univent system or the air handling system that we have at Hobbamock. So at Hobbamock, the air is controlled by 6 rooftop units. Each rooftop unit does control a certain section of the building. I showed you there that first picture is a picture of what a rooftop unit looks like. I assure you that the bulk of the units on top of Hobbamock Elementary School are 40 plus years old. Hobbamock itself was built in 1972. There was a renovation and a remodel in 1997. Most of the building was existing to remain at that time. A lot of the equipment that's up there is 40 plus years old. But here's an outline of each of those units, the areas of the building that they do service, as well as a little bit about the units. So each of the units has a double filter setup. A lot of this is going to sound super nerdy, and I apologize, but I think it's important background information for folks to have. We talked a lot during COVID about MERV filters and the level of MERV filtering. So each of the units on top of Hobbamock is a double filter system, which means it has a paper, either MERV 8 or MERV 10 filter that is changed every 4 months. And it has a fixed MERV 12 or MERV 13 filter, so a metal filter that is then changed annually or as needed. Each classroom has on average 2 supply and 2 exhaust vents. So in the picture you can see a supply vent is where it's pushing out, an exhaust vent, just like it sounds like in your kitchen, is pulling up the air and having it move through the ductwork and exit the building. I know that Patrick had suggested that if folks had questions that they wanted included in the presentation, that they send it to us ahead of time. I think there was just one question that came in, and the question did ask that we give a little bit more history on Hobbamock, so here's my best attempt at that. In August of 2003, linked there is a press release from Superintendent at the time, Pat Randall. That was a request from Dr. Randall for the school committee to expend funds to professionally clean and remove or remediate mold that had been found at Hobbamock due to an infiltration of water as well as a high humidity summer. So that is linked there. I was not here in 2003. I don't think any of you were on the committee in 2003, but again, that did exist and that is linked there. More recently, in November of 2016, there was a concern raised about a musty odor in areas of the building. We did some air quality testing by the environmental consultant that we used, Paul Mazuka. That was done in November of 2016. In 2017, the district partnered with the Department of Public Health indoor air quality assessment and did a full indoor air quality testing at all 5 buildings. So again, not something that was just unique to Hobbamock, done in all 5 buildings. In December of 2020, though some of us have blocked it out of our minds, we were in the process of returning students and staff to learn here in Pembroke, and we did full building air health checks on all 5 buildings conducted by Pure Air.
Before you move on, the August 2003 event, and I only remember it because we had kids about to start kindergarten and one that was still in the elementary school, and we actually had a delay open that year. As a result, my understanding was there was a flood of some sort. There was
some infiltration of water. Believe it or not, our record keeping from 2003 is not tremendous. I think Jess was the only person that worked here in 2003. So I did ask her a little bit about it. Obviously, she does remember Dr. Randall making a specification in August about potentially delaying the opening of school at Hobbamock that year, but there's no specific files that I could.
So, having been a father of a parent back then, I'm that old, by the way. There was some form of flood or what have you that got under the carpet, got under the tiles, and it did delay the opening of school.
Was it the roof that malfunctioned?
No, it wasn't.
It was a pipe?
I don't believe it was the roof that it came in.
It was water that
came
was
in.
coming up through the ground.
It
and the-
poured like
The
crazy.
larger concern that
and-
happened is that at the time, Hobbamuck had asbestos floor tiles in some sections of the building. So once asbestos is disrupted, you do have to appropriately remove and remediate it. So that is a much larger scale project than mold remediation.
And then my other question is something that was mentioned last week about Dr. Randall in 2013. Just to be clear, Dr. Randall left the district in 2007, at which point we hired Dr. Hackett. So I'm not sure, and it may have just been.
I think it was just a
It may have
miss.
just been a
Yep.
miss, right?
Yep.
It was supposed to be 2003, not 2013.
Yep, I have been here since 2010, and I feel comfortable speaking about anything that's happened from 2010 on. So I'm going to jump into some of that. There has been some conversation about what role do people play in this conversation, who works for who doesn't work for who. I thought it would be helpful just to put in a slide that shows Lisa Cullity is our licensed health agent. Here on that slide, you can just see what does the health agent in a town do, and what are some of the minimum requirements in the state of Massachusetts to be a health agent. I know personally that Lisa holds far greater certification than what is listed there, but Lisa is the person in town that decides whether a restaurant can open, whether a school can open, whether occupancy is potential in businesses across the district. She is the licensing agent in Pembroke. The expert that we work with from the district side is Paul. You'll hear me say Paul's name 100 times tonight. He is our air quality expert. You can see there his list of certifications. Paul is a certified industrial hygienist as well as a certified indoor environmental consultant. Scott Fulmer works for the MTA. I'm positive that Scott has far greater qualifications than what I have listed up there. I do know that he is a UMass Lowell graduate, which is a very prestigious program. The only certification that has really come into play, well, we've had conversations, is his certification through Normie as a mold remediator and inspector. So I'm not saying any one certification is better than the other, but the folks that we are working with are licensed and certified to do this work.
And just to be clear, these aren't Lisa's qualifications.
No, this is
that
just
are on
what a
there.
Board of Health agent
Yeah,
needs
that's-
to
I
have in the
just-
state of Massachusetts.
Again, want to be 100% transparent.
Please don't get scared, there's a lot of words on the next slide. So in November of 2016, as I referenced in the beginning, Paul, our environmental consultant, came to Pembroke to investigate an odor that had been reported in the kindergarten, first grade, and third grade hallways. Linked here is the full report from 2016. Here on this slide, I've captured what his observations were when he came in November of 2016. Again, you can see there was no visible mold growth. You can see the list of the classrooms that he looked at. He looked at ceiling, vent grills. He looked at HVAC supply vents. He did notice a musty odor in room 130 in the back of the room. He looked at the supply diffuser. Again, just a list of what was looked at in November of 2016. He obviously did some sampling. There's 3 types of measurements that he was taking that day. The first is just overall indoor air quality. That's table 3, so looking at the temperature, relative humidity, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide levels within the buildings, as well as the outside air. In table 1, you can see the air or spore trap sampling results that he took. So there's a little bit of a discussion about what each type of sampling is there on the right, but the spore trap sampling it's a device that sits on a tripod. It is designed to take a measured time amount of air sample. I think it's 2.5 minutes is what it is, but I'm not 100% sure on that, to give a representative sample of what the air in the room looks like at that given time. In addition, he did some tape lift sampling. So again, just like it sounds, almost like Scotch tape on a hard surface to then have the particles that are on the tape tested. You can see there, there's a whole host of mold species present in outside air. And I think that's an important thing to just recognize and talk a little bit about. It is cliche to say that there is mold everywhere, but I think all of us, most of us as homeowners, know that there is truly some sort of mold almost everywhere. And what you would expect if the HVAC in any building was functioning appropriately, that what you see outside, you would predominantly see inside, but at a lower quantity, right? There's some sort of filtering that's going to happen through the HVAC system. So looking at what's present in the outside air is important when you're looking at what's present in the inside air samples that have been taken.
Just so I understand, this is from 2016?
This is November of 2016.
Yeah.
We are going to get there, Rhonda, and we're going to get there fast.
Being thorough.
Yep, one of some of the feedback that was received was that going back to just August of '23 wasn't a clear enough picture of what has been happening at Hobbamock. So, in the report, again, that's linked on that slide, there were some recommendations made by Paul after his visit. As I showed you from the table of results, that there was the spore trap samples showed very low levels of airborne mold, again, those that were present outside, no current visible mold or water damage from materials that were observed. At the time, he recommended no additional mold sampling. The indoor air quality baseline samples were well within the ASHERA guidelines. No additional indoor air quality sampling was recommended. What he did say that is if the concern persists, to do some additional sampling investigation, and as I'm going to get to next, we did engage with the Department of Public Health in November to do just that. Supply and return vents, again, those two pictures that I showed you earlier on. Within the kindergarten wing, he recommended that they be cleaned of accumulated dust or debris. Again, then that work happened by our Hobbamock maintenance staff during the December break in 2016. He also suggested that we have the air handling unit that supplies the kindergarten classrooms and third grade wing professionally assessed. That work was done in January of 2017 by our HVAC contractor at the time, Arnold Refrigeration. Look, Rhonda, it's already been a year. Just flip the page. In November of 2017, we started a process with the Department of Public Health and their indoor air quality program. That's a free program available to public schools in Massachusetts. Their focus is not necessarily to come in and test for mold, but to come in and test all facets of indoor air quality. They actually don't really test for mold. They do test for, as you can see, our carbon dioxide, relative humidity, carbon monoxide, and the fine particulate matter is where you can see some fungal particles, some fiber particles and whatnot as we get into that. That was a more extensive review of the building, so 54 areas were tested at Hobbamock for each of those things, as well as the result recommendations are listed there. The full report is posted on our website. They made a series of conclusions and recommendations. I am not going to go through all of them, but you can see that just about everything that was recommended in November of 2017 by the Department of Public Health tester was implemented. There is one issue that's number 11 says avoid placing refrigerators in water dispensers on carpet, use waterproof mat or tile. We do still have one refrigerator in the teacher's room that is on carpet. So again, that is something that I would say is pretty easily fixed and something that we can definitely manage. One of the other pieces was regularly cleaning and vacuuming supply vents and fans. Again, that has not been something that has been part of the routine maintenance of our custodial staff. We did have the building professionally cleaned fully over the summer of 2024, meaning the air supply units, and then moving forward, the custodians will upkeep that work that was done by an outside vendor. So again, everything that was listed as a conclusion and recommendation in 2017 was implemented, other than that one refrigerator on the carpet. In December of 2020, we spent a lot of time talking about air, the quality of the air in our buildings, the presence of COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. So in 2020, we engaged with Pure Air Systems to do a building health check again on all 5 buildings. This is the information just for Hobbamock, but all 5 buildings is also posted on our website if you'd like to see those differences. So again, they sampled a representative sample of classrooms in the building. 8 rooms were sampled. They did surface tape, so again, pressing down on a hard surface to pick up the particles that are present, then measuring those particles, as well as overall indicators of air quality, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, humidity, temperature, the things we've kind of already gone through before. On this page, you can see the results. Obviously, when we're looking at results, red is always alarming. So just to clarify, at the top, you can see some red, and there we're talking about temperature and relative humidity. I will remind folks that even though it was December, when we had students in our building in December of 2020, we were also teaching with the windows open to continue airflow happening in our buildings. So those temperatures, though they're lower than the recommended value, and the humidity is lower than the recommended value, given what the circumstances were in the building at the time, the report concludes that that was within reason for that December day. The next table showed just what some of the tape samples showed in each of the rooms. There was one desk in particular. There was a student desk in room 240 that had a whole bunch of bird dander on it.
Bird?
Yeah, it was bird dander. Again, the full report is there. on the website, but they did share some conclusions and recommendations with us after they left. So,
What about the fibers here that are in red?
right, so the fibers are respiratory fibers. So it could be a mixture of dust, I would say pollen, but in December of 2020, there wasn't much pollen. It could be a whole host of things. They measure respiratory size particles. They did find that the fungal elements in room 240 were detected to be slightly elevated. You can see from the chart there that the fungal elements they're speaking of were at the teacher desk. I did work here in December of 2020, and I can assure you that most staff were eating at their workstation. We weren't congregating in teacher lunchrooms or eating lunch outside of that. I hate to go back to 2020, but we did have atomizers that we were using in our school districts to ensure that student spaces and frequently touched surfaces were disinfected regularly. What that meant was our custodial staff was spraying down student desks, door handles. Teachers specifically asked that we not spray down their workstation because they have their personal belongings on that. So again, those are some of the reasons why fungal elements on the teacher desk in room 240 may be high.
So is it food?
It doesn't. They weren't testing specifically for mold, but there was mold spores found on the teacher desk. They talked a little bit about some of the excessive dust that was found in some of the rooms. Often higher levels of dust result from elevated human activity. So again, we were just reintroducing students and staff into our spaces at that time. Everything else that they tested was well within the guidelines as far as carbon dioxide, temperature, relative humidity, as I spoke about. They did actually look at 3 of our rooftop units, Air Handler 1, ACU 1, and Air Handler 7. They noticed a significant amount of dust was covering those. Again, something that we should be, doing more preventative maintenance on. And for certainty, there was no radon detected in any of the buildings. Their report listed a series of recommendations. Again, listed on this slide, talks about what those recommendations were and when they were completed. So the first set of recommendations centered around air conveyance. They suggested we clean and sanitize the air handlers. That was completed by Arnold Refrigeration in the spring of 21. Environmentally clean and sanitize the air distribution system. As I said before, that was not fully completed until this past summer. Air handler and air distribution cleaning needs to be completed by the licensed HVAC vendor, which it was. We started working on it in 2020, but again, it wasn't fully completed until this past summer when we did the remaining 4 units at Hobbamock.
And why the gap?
I just wasn't something that was part of our preventative maintenance at the time. So our maintenance staff does a great job. We have great folks that work here doing the vacuuming of the vents, taking the tops off, vacuuming, getting the loose pencils and that kind of stuff. Arnold Refrigeration, our HVAC contractor at the time, it's a very easy system, a very easy process for them to sanitize the units on the roof. It's getting somebody that's crawling through the ductwork to sanitize, which is a much larger project. Environmental cleaning was recommended. That included cleaning and sanitizing all surfaces, direct contact vacuuming, and uses of registered biocide. All of that work was completed by our maintenance staff and is still completed by our maintenance staff. That's regular routine cleaning in our buildings. Again, you'll remember in 2020 we were doing more than routine cleaning just to make sure that students and staff were safe during our COVID pandemic. In general, they recommended the use of filters that were at least a MERV 8. I already shared with you that the filters at Hobbamock are more than a MERV 8. They're double filtered, making sure that they fit properly in the units, making sure that they are changed regularly, making sure that all of the vacuums that are being used by our maintenance staff have HEPA filters, which they do, and then talking about setting thermostats to maintain proper temperature and relative humidity. So again, everything that was recommended in 2020 was implemented. So here's where we are, right? So it was pretty quiet from 2020, relatively, from 2020 to 2023. But in August of 2023, there was a concern raised in room 225. In September of 2023, additional areas of concern were raised by staff. We did have Paul introduce some testing, which I'll share and talk about. In October of 23, the Pembroke Teachers Association did file a complaint for hazardous working conditions with the Division of Labor Standards. I will talk about that as well. In November of 2023, all the recommended remediation was completed, a closeout report was issued, and the DLS complaint was closed. A little more detail about each of those steps. So if you can remember, the summer of 2023 was a very humid summer here in Pembroke and here in Massachusetts. We are fortunate to run our special education extended school year program at Havamock. This year in particular, that program ran on the other side of the building. So the wing that houses our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classrooms was pretty much closed tight for the school year, or for the summer. So our custodians went in and did their summer cleaning, stripping and waxing of the floors, but there was very little movement of anybody or anything in that side of the building over the course of that summer. In addition, the rooftop unit still brings in air even when school is not in session. So the rooftop unit's air handler 2, which services that side of the building, was still bringing in the humid air into those classrooms, but there was no expelling or movement of that air. Additional concerns were raised by staff. I consulted with Lisa Cullity both over the phone. She came in and took a look at Havamock. We had the areas in question professionally cleaned prior to students returning back to school after Labor Day. Testing was scheduled with Paul. He did his first round of testing on September 19th. That testing warranted additional testing that happened on September 25th. He put together a remediation plan that involves purchasing HEPA filters to run in classrooms outside of school hours, having the entire supply ductwork system in the 456 hallway professionally cleaned. In addition to that, the Pembroke Teachers Association did their own testing in October of 2023. And then in November, follow-up testing was performed by Paul 30 days after the full completing of the HVAC system. There was no elevated reports, results reported, and then he issued a closeout report. So, yeah. Specifics on the dates that concerns were raised. On August 29th and August 30th, as our staff and students returned to school at Havamock Elementary School, we heard from a couple of staff members about papers, cardboard that seemed to have some spotting on it or some water damage. Obviously, that's concerning. Myself and Mary Beth went over, we took a look at it, we consulted with the Board of Health agent. Her recommendation was that out of an abundance of caution, we have those rooms professionally cleaned and sanitized over the Labor Day weekend. All of that work happened. You can see the list of the rooms that were cleaned and that they were cleaned on September 4th, 2023. In addition, Lisa came out to do another inspection of the building on September 14th because we had received some additional concerns from staff. One was a kick plate outside a doorway in the art room hallway, which is part of the photo slides that I'll get to in a moment. And then we did some, as I mentioned, there was scheduling testing scheduled with Paul for September 19th. So did we tell anybody what was happening? Sure. Here's a list of the communication that occurred between either myself or the administrators at Havamock with staff and families over the course of the 23-24 school year. Obviously, the conversation started when I attended a staff meeting at Havamock on September 19th. Paul, our tester, was with me. He was there really to test specifically the concerns in room 225, but we opened it up to staff. Tell us about other concerns you have. They identified a couple of areas throughout the building. Paul included that in his testing as well. We sent a letter to families in September regarding the concerns and remediation steps in the 4-5 wing. Again, as I mentioned on the timeline before, a significant amount of work was done between September and November. I attended a Havamock PTO meeting to address parent concerns. Communication went to all Havamock families about the remediation and concerns. Opportunities were arranged for folks to come and ask questions. Myself and Mary Beth sat at the parent-teacher conferences at Havamock Elementary School on March 20th. There was one parent inquiry. We held a community forum for folks to come and ask questions, a Q&A with myself and Lisa Cullity. We had 4 parents attend, 1 staff member, and 1 community member. On March 26th, I attended another Havamock staff meeting to answer any remaining questions. And then if there has been a question that has come up from a family over the course of this time and it's gone to either Michael or Ashley Cross, our current principal at Havamock, those have been responded to as well. So what did it show us in September? So Paul came out and took some testing on September 19th. What he found was elevated levels of Aspergillus, penicillium, and cladosporium in room 225. There you have a little bit of an excerpt from the report. Again, the report is linked there and you can read the whole thing. Both of those items are typically found in outside air samples during that time of year, but the concentration in which they were found in room 225 was much higher than you would expect. So again, that necessitated some additional testing. So we had only tested room 225 when he came out that day, so he came back on 925 and tested a whole host of other rooms in that same 4, 5, 6 hallway to get a more accurate picture of what was happening with air handler number 2. Those results are all posted there. I tried to keep all of the footnotes, but again, everything is linked and is on our website. So after the testing, Paul recommended that air handler 2 and all of the associated ductwork for the classrooms 225 and 230 should be cleaned and decontaminated. That work was completed by Air Duct Services, who is a licensed mold remediation specialist. That was done in October of '23. He recommended that HEPA filtration via scrubbing fans be placed in rooms 225 and 230. That would reduce airborne mold levels outside of school time. So those units themselves were pretty loud, so they ran during off-school hours. We purchased more than the 2 that he recommended during the time frame of September of '23, and we're rotating them in the classrooms in that wing until the Air Duct Services came to do the cleaning in October. He recommended that our maintenance staff do some surface disinfecting on a regular basis to assist with removing any settled spores. Again, that our maintenance staff is well able to do that. And then he said, if possible, to try to really maintain the humidity levels. So additional dehumidifiers were purchased and added to the 456 wing in order to keep the humidity levels below 60.
So I have a question.
Yep.
So we did the testing on 9/19, found the elevated
Yep, so then he came back
levels.
and took more samples.
So on 9/25,
Yep.
he took more samples. And then we immediately bought the HEPA scrubbers,
So
right?
so when he was out in September, he suggested that we get them. He sent a link to kind of the easiest
But
one to get.
we went
Yep,
out and
immediately
got
got
it right
them.
away. And then by October, we had the air duct service and the air ducts cleaned.
Right, so we purchased the scrubbers on his recommendation while he was here. Obviously, he has to send the samples out to be tested and then write a report. We bought the scrubbers while we were waiting for that, and then his report outlined the full remediation, which included the air duct cleaning. So again, everything that was recommended in the fall of '23 was completed. Sure, Rhonda.
No, go ahead. What? Can you come up to the microphone, just so people can hear you? Yeah. So there will be questions at the end. I want to be really clear.
No, you
But
can-
no, go ahead. If you have something on this slide, ask.
That other slide that it said, follow the guidelines.
Yep, so
it
that's
says-
about cleaning products, what's used
Oh,
to, yeah.
remedies response to be conducted in accordance with the guidelines standard established by
Yep.
U.S. EPA, OSHA. Are we governed by OSHA? Like,
So
do we
school
have to
districts are
follow-
not governed by OSHA,
Okay.
but obviously they have a whole host of best practices and cleaning protocols that we would institute in an instance like
Oh,
this
okay.
at the
I just
recommendation.
was
Yep.
curious if we had to do that or not.
Municipalities are not subject to
Okay.
OSHA.
All right, just curious.
Yep. So again, Paul issued a closeout report in November of 2023. That report includes Table 3 that you see here on the left-hand side, which shows the sampling that was done, both on September 19th, September 25th, October 16th, and then the final round of sampling on November 13th, which represents 30 days after the air handler was professionally cleaned. That is in line with the IICRC recommendations for what appropriate remediation looks like. So that shows all of the results. On the right-hand side, I realize it's really hard to see. That is the note from the Division of Labor Standards closing the complaint.
So IICRC is
Is a
what?
cleaning protocol.
Okay.
And so it recommends when you do remediation that you not necessarily test the next day after remediation has been complete, because there's still residual airflow that's happening. Right? As I mentioned on the earlier slide, in addition to the testing that we were doing, the Pembroke Teachers Association also conducted testing on 10/10/2023. Due to a whole host of reasons, those results were not shared with myself or any member of administration until January 19th, 2024. You'll remember we had some internet outage situations happening in a few places. There was some inability for the tester from the MTA to meet with representatives from the Teachers Association to share the results with them before they shared them with us. But again, there was a significant amount of time that lapsed between when the testing occurred and when the information was shared with us. With that being said, the testing that was completed, the results are here in those two tables. Table 1, similar to Paul's methods, the MTA tester did some air sampling, similar the spore trap method that I explained earlier. You can see that anything in red was an elevated level or reading. Again, everything that you see there also, in most instances, occurs in the outside air as well. Obviously, as I said before, you'd want it to be outside at a higher level than it is inside. But you can see from the footnote from the Pembroke Teachers Association results is that the lab that they use assigns a score to each of the samples. A rating less than 150 is indicative of a low and a low probability of spores originating inside. And these scores assigned to all of the air samples that were submitted were less than 150. In addition, the tester from the Pembroke Teachers Association also took some tape samples, like I discussed earlier. As you can see, there was some mold growth found on some of the areas of the building. Again, not something that I would necessarily want in my own home or in a school building where my students go, but the results make sense, right? So if cladosporium is found in a concentration outside, and you're telling me that it's also found on the blinds in room 225, the windows are open right there. So the settling of spores, to me, logistically makes sense for it to be on the blinds, but again, definitely an indication that we needed to do some additional cleaning at Hobbamock.
And we did.
Don't jump to the conclusion.
Okay, well, hold on, though. I have one question.
Yep.
In the teacher's lounge, it says the Penicillium aspergillus.
Yep.
My God, I don't
Yep.
know. I feel like I'm in a schoolhouse rock thing. It had 1,300, but that's way over the 150.
No, so the score to the sample was 150, so they take all of the pieces and give it a score.
Okay.
Again, just for
Sorry,
folks that are
coming up to speed on
not
mold.
familiar with Penicillium aspergillus, is a type of mold that is often found on decaying plant matter and fertilizer. So, not always it's root, but one of the places where you can consistently find that type of mold. So in the report shared with us from the testing that was done by the Pembroke Teachers Association, there was a whole host of recommendations that they made as well. Number one being establishing a strong health and safety committee, as I alluded to in the beginning, both myself and Tim Kennedy are proud members of that strong health and safety committee. But you can see here from the list that pretty much everything that the PTA tester recommended at the time, we were implementing without even seeing the results. In addition to that, the one area that I want to draw our attention to is that he did suggest that we consider removing the rugs in the teacher's lounge. Rugs in the teacher's room, the music room, and the library were professionally cleaned over February break, but they were not removed. The music room rug has since been removed. These are some of the photos that were circulating about Hobbamock mold concerns. Let's just say what it is. Some of these are pretty gross, right? I think it's important, though, to have some background to the photo, when it was taken, when the concern was shared, and what the remediation steps were. So for each of the photos, you can see there that I've shared when the concern was raised with administration. So again, the photos that you're seeing, photos 1, 2, and 3, those are from the beginning of school that I discussed in August of 23. These pictures didn't start circulating until February of 24, but again, some of the information in it is representative of the conditions in the building in August when staff and students returned to the building. So again, 1, 2, 3 is classroom items. The concern was raised on 8/31. Remediation steps included consultation with the health agent, contracted the cleaning company to have all their rooms professionally cleaned. Photo 4 is a floor kick plate, do it like this, is a floor kick plate in the hall by the art room. Again, as I mentioned, we did have staff raise additional concerns over the course of those first couple weeks of school. That concern was raised to myself on 9/12/23. Lisa Cullity met me at Hobbamock on 9/13/23 to take a look at it. It was her professional opinion that it was not mold growth. Her recommendation was to clean and monitor the area, and that, out of an abundance of caution, we should have it tested. That area was tested when Paul came out on September 19th. No elevated air levels were found there.
What number are you on?
Photo 4.
Thank you.
Photo 5 is a stained ceiling tile by an exit sign. That concern was shared with us at the first meeting of that Health and Safety Committee on February 14th, 24. On February 20th, 2024, that ceiling tile was replaced by maintenance staff. There's no evidence of a recurring leak there. Photo 6 is in room 140. So as I said before, there was a concern of a musty odor in that building, in that room, both on November of 2016, and a concern was raised by the current staff member in that building in November of 2023. That room was not included in the testing that was done in September of 23 or the testing that was done by the PTA in October of 23, but we have obviously since had that room tested, and then additional investigation was done into the root cause of the musty odor both on 226 and 312. Photo 7 shows a missing ceiling tile. That concern again was shared with us.
did we get the root cause?
No, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So the photo 7 is a missing ceiling tile. That concern was shared with us again in that first meeting. The ceiling tile was replaced with the new vinyl tile over February break. Photo 8 is a fixture in a staff restroom. That again was shared with us on the February 14th meeting. That plumbing fixture was replaced on 2/21/24, and there's no evidence of a continued leak there. Photos 9, 10, and 11 are of the rug in the library at Hobbamock. That concern again was shared with us during that 2/14 meeting. The rug in the teacher's room, music room, and the library were professionally cleaned over February break, so February 22nd, 2024. Photo 12 was shared with us again at the 2/14 meeting. What you see there is a bucket of disinfecting wipes that was purchased during 2020 during COVID. It's a sealed plastic bucket with moistened wipes in a humid setting. The manufacturer's instruction states storage is to be in a well-ventilated space to keep it cool and to discard 12 months after the production date. So obviously that bucket of wipes has since been discarded. As I said in the beginning, we have been working with the Pembroke Teachers Association pretty consistently for a long time at Hobbamock.
Need to go one more.
Sorry. So there have been a lot of meetings since the start of that Health and Safety Committee on February 14th, 2024. Allison is the liaison for the school committee that sat at those meetings. The purpose of those meetings was to negotiate a side letter of agreement that talked about how concerns would be managed moving forward. Again, these buildings are 50 plus years old. I would be foolish to think there isn't going to be a concern that happens somewhere at some time. So it made sense to come up with a plan for what we do and how we address that when a concern arises. So we met pretty regularly to hammer out that side letter of agreement. At the same time, to the point that Patrick was making, there was more investigation done to see what is the cause of that musty odor. If you talk to a staff member at Hobbamock who either worked there in 2003 when Jess worked there, who worked there in 2010 or 2015 or 2020, everybody has a story about a musty odor at some point in the building at Hobbamock. So it's not unique to this year or to last year or even to the past 2 decades. So really what type of investigation would happen? So, you know, Hobbamock itself is a cement slab construction, as are most school buildings in Massachusetts. That's not great in a wet climate. So the cement slab is almost never dry. When Paul comes out to do our testing, he does do dampness samples. He has a reader and he checks in each of the room. Obviously the areas closest to the window dry with the natural sunlight, but the cement slab further towards the middle of the room is never actually dry. So again, we committed to doing some additional exploration to figure out what is the root cause of those things. The group continued to meet. We made some additional adjustments to the side letter of agreements to add the other buildings in for some baseline testing. If this is happening at Hobbamock, shouldn't we check to make sure it's not happening somewhere else? All 5 buildings were tested in November of 2024. There were no elevated levels detected in any of the buildings, even Hobbamock. All of those results are also posted on the webpage. Everything that I receive from our certified indoor environmental consultant is shared with me at the exact same time that it's shared with the Pembroke Teachers Association. So I don't get a preview of the reports, I don't see the results ahead of time, everything is sent in one joint email. The communication doesn't necessarily work the same way on the other side. So the PTA expert shares their results with PTA members before they share them with us. So again, sometimes there's a lag, as you saw in that October testing, between when they have results and when they're even shared with us as concerns.
So I'm confused. So the side letter of agreement says that all of
The side letter of agreement says all of the reports and the results by the certified indoor environmental consultant will be shared on one joint email. It doesn't say anything about how results are shared when the PTA does their own testing.
Perhaps that needs to be adjusted.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So, but just to be clear though, so we have no preview to what that report says. It gets shared with everyone.
At the same
But
time.
on the other side,
They
they
get
can
a
go
preview
through and
of
get a
the-
preview and everything
Correct.
else and then can come.
Correct.
Seems unfair, but okay.
The side letter of agreement also discusses creating a joint labor management committee that consists of the PTA president, the vice president, the negotiation chair, our experts, myself, Mary Beth. So that group met in, we met on October 7th, 2024 to discuss the protocol. So we thought it would be really helpful if we created a flow chart for staff to say, if something's happening, here's who you tell and how you tell them. If you tell Mr. Murphy, you don't have to tell your building reps as well. If you tell your building reps, you don't have to tell Mr. Murphy that we're sharing information, right? Concerns by a staff member should be openly shared between other staff members and administration.
Now, to be fair, to be totally fair, is that happening? So if I tell Mr. Murphy, is he
Yes.
telling my union rep?
That's how it's supposed to go, yes. So again, I created a flow chart. It was shared with the Pembroke Teachers Association on November 1st. We have not received any feedback on that flow chart. I know we are trying to schedule a meeting in the upcoming weeks about taking a look at the flow chart and the protocols, but that has not happened yet. As we are investigating what is happening, why is there an order, why are the levels what they are at Habermock, it was the recommendation of our tester that we do testing at different times. So traditionally, we have been testing at Habermock after school hours, so the 3:15, 3:30 start. Paul did come in on March 12th and take some testing results in the morning to see. I would hate to say it's the kids that are moldy, because it's not the intent. It's not the intent, but folks that are familiar with our building and Habermock in particular know that our students enjoy a great amount of time at recess on those soccer fields that are beautifully maintained by Pembroke Youth Soccer, that use a whole host of organic fertilizer to keep that grass green. And as I mentioned before, Aspergillus penicillium does grow on decaying plant matter as well as in most fertilizer. So taking samples at different times, I think, gives us a better idea of, the overall picture of the building. So you can see there was varying results. Obviously, at the beginning of the school day, there was very little, if any, spores in the air. That's a function of our HVAC units as well. Traditionally, our units run when people are in the building. So 5 of the 6 units at Habermock run from 8 to 3:30. During school days. The unit on top of the 456 wing does run 24/7. That was the recommendation when they had that moisture concern in August of 23. The rest of the units do run on a schedule that is more consistent with a student or staff schedule. So what did we look at? Paul took some more air samples. He cut away some drywall. He lifted up floor tiles. He did some investigation in the pelum above the drop ceiling tiles. He took a look under the beautiful carpeted benches in the 456 classroom. So as part of the addition in 1997, these beautiful reading nooks were added to the 456 classrooms. Definitely a wonderful thought. But if you can kind of zoom in on that picture there on the right, they were not necessarily constructed in the best way. They are untreated plywood exposed to the exterior. So we put some carpet on top of it, which makes it really nice, right? But there's obviously some concerns there. So when Paul climbed underneath the unit in room 240, so that's the carpeted bench in 240, he did find a type of mold that you don't want to find in a school building or in any building. So Stachybotrys was found underneath that bench there. It wasn't in the air in any of the sampling that has ever been taken from November of 2016 all the way through present day, but the tape sample did reveal that underneath that bench there was that type of mold.
But just to repeat, there's never been Stachybotrys spores in the air at any time that anyone has done sampling, including the PTA person.
Correct.
Okay.
So again, not a type of mold that you want, not something that, in the opinion of our tester or of our health agent, necessitated moving the students or staff in that classroom. But the recommendation was that we remove the benches. That work did happen over the summer. So here you can see the conclusion of the late February, early March investigation done by Paul. It's listed here on the left. The recommended remediation work that has been completed across the building is on the right. So not specific to any one classroom or any one space, but every single supply unit at Habermock Elementary School for all 6 units has now been professionally cleaned. All the carpeted benches in the 456 wing were professionally removed. So again, only the underneath the bench in room 240 was tested. But again, it's the same construction across all 456 classrooms. So every single bench was removed over the summer. Our maintenance staff does do general summer cleaning in all buildings and all classrooms, which includes wiping down hard surfaces, frequently touched areas. All of that happens. Carpeting in the music room was replaced with tile flooring. In addition to the HEPA filters that I talked about earlier that we purchased in September of 2023, we had an opportunity to partner with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to acquire some HEPA air scrubbing units. These are hospital grade air scrubbing units, and that is a link there to the unit's profile. It's on our webpage. It is a very quiet unit that can run while students and staff are in the building. I recognize that there are a whole host of students and staff that have different types of allergies, whether it's mold, whether it's pollen. This is an added accommodation that we can offer to students, families, and to staff that have those known allergies to make the classrooms even more safe.
Are they in all classrooms?
We have a whole bunch of them. I think they're in predominantly every single classroom. Some of the smaller special education pull-out areas or offices don't necessarily have them. There are some that we move between meeting spaces. If we're going to hold a meeting in the library conference room or in one of the other conference rooms, we will move them.
But all of the main classrooms have these filters in them?
Yes.
And do they run only when people are in the building? Or?
No, so they're set to run all of the time. They are quiet enough that you don't even necessarily notice that they're going. So they are
How
running.
frequently do the filters
The
have
filters
to be
need to be
replaced?
changed every 3 years. So
Okay.
they are
Wow.
a pretty industrial model.
That's great.
Obviously, our maintenance staff is keeping an eye on that. If they need to be changed earlier than that, we do have the filters to change them as well. Again, as I mentioned before, the carpets in the large group instruction room, library, and teachers room were professionally cleaned, and all of the blinds in the classroom were disinfected. And all of the blinds in all of the classrooms were disinfected over the summer. So as part of our side letter of agreement, we have agreed to doing ongoing quarterly monitoring. So that agreement is really unique to Hobbamock. So there was quarterly monitoring done at Hobbamock in August of 2024. There were 2 concerns identified. In the music room, there was a pipe leaking in the ceiling above the door. Our vendor, Hoadley Plumbing, came out and repaired that on 8/16/24. And as you can see from the report that's linked there, there was a recommendation to have the carpet in the music room professionally cleaned again prior to students coming back from summer break. Instead, we removed the carpet and replaced it with tile. I feel like we've heard a couple times that the carpet in the music room was a concern, so let's just do the best we can and replace it before students come in. In addition, there was a concern in room 240, and the recommendation was that we do that an additional dehumidifier be placed in that space, which has happened. As I said, we tweaked that side letter of agreement so that we could get some baseline testing in all 5 buildings. That happened in November of 2024. All 5 reports are linked there. There were no concerns or elevated levels noted at any of the buildings in the November testing. The tester, Paul, did recommend that we replace stained ceiling tiles across the district. That is good preventative maintenance practice. If the leak has been fixed, let's replace the tile. That is easier said than done. Some of the tiles are around sprinkler heads or around motion sensors or those computer access points. So again, our custodians are usually pretty good about changing out the easy ones. It's the more complex ones that take them a little bit longer to get after. And he did recommend that our maintenance staff continue vacuuming with HEPA vacuums and do a more thorough cleaning by staff. So what happens if something comes up outside of the quarterly monitoring? So there was an issue at Hobbamock that came up outside of our quarterly monitoring. So we monitored in August and there was no concern, but there was a concern raised in September, the end of September 2024, about a supply closet attached to the large group instruction room. It is not a student or staff space. There's no air exchange with that space or in the rest of the building. Space is serviced by 2 ductless air conditioning systems with built-in dehumidifiers. Those systems were old and were leaking. We were fortunate enough over this past summer to have those units replaced. And as you can see from the photos that accompany that slide, that the contractor that replaced those ductless air systems didn't do a great job cleaning up behind themselves. So you can see a cut piece of drywall that was left lying on the floor that has obviously indications of the fact that the unit that was present before that was leaking. But again, a concern nonetheless that was raised by staff and that was quickly addressed.
Cost.
Sorry, no, I don't want to do cost.
You have remediation completed.
It's a beautiful picture of what it looked like at Hobbamock. So both the tester from the MTA, Scott, came out and did some testing in that space as well. Prior to the remediation, Scott came out, so his test results are on the website, but I don't think you need a degree to know that those pictures you saw were mold. Doesn't take an expert, but again, those sample results are posted on the website. Paul came out and took a look at the space, again, did not see the need to sample again. Paul's samples were enough. There was enough indication that that was mold. He put together a full remediation plan. That remediation plan was completed in early October. You can see some pictures there of what that looked like. Allied Environmental came out and set up a full containment, cut away all the drywall, did all of the necessary steps outlined in the work plan. Paul came back and did testing to show that the remediation efforts were complete. At no time were we instructed by the Board of Health, by our expert, or by the expert from the Pembroke Teachers Association that students and staff could not be using the LIR. They just recommended that during the point of time when the remediation was occurring, that staff not be in, students and staff not be in there. So once the containment was set up, we stopped using the room. So none of this is free. And we have spent a significant amount of money on this. And so what this slide outlines for you is what we've spent. So for an issue that we have been dealing with from really truly August to present day, I know that I did share with you 2016, 2017, and 2020, but we have really been working through this since August of 23. We have spent about $33,000 on testing, reports, results, recommendations, and outlines of remediation. It was just about $67,000 to have the supply ductwork at Hobbamock completely cleaned. We had our rooftop units cleaned by our new HVAC vendor at the time, North Star. We replaced those 2 ductless air conditioning units in the LIR. Allied Environmental set up that beautiful containment and remediation that you just saw on the previous slide. We have had both Stanley Steamer and Serve Pro come in and do various environmental cleaning, whether it's in those classrooms that I originally identified in August, or the rugs in the teacher's room, library, etc., and the replacing of the flooring in the music room. So we've spent to date, from August to present day, just over $166,000 on this concern. What are the future costs? So every time we do quarterly monitoring, it's about $2,200 for the samples to be taken, to be analyzed by a lab, and the report to be written. We are obviously moving towards a full HVAC replacement at Hobbamock Elementary School. The price range for that is $1.3 to $1.6 million. We have started working with vendors on the bidding process to hopefully accomplish that replacement over the course of this summer. That is work that can only happen over the summer. It does entail obviously shutting down the air system to the building, bringing in cranes, removing heavy equipment. It would not be something we would entertain while students or staff are in the building. I want to draw attention to the fact that we have been asking for HVAC replacements at the past 4 capital warrant articles at town meeting. So this is something we have been planning for and working towards. In addition to that, at this upcoming Springtown meeting, I have asked for a capital warrant article for $100,000 to continue to remove the carpet at Hobbamock. I mean, though a lot of times the recommendation is to continue to vacuum it or have it professionally cleaned, I think what we've seen is that the best thing to do is to remove it. So obviously continuing to work on that project.
How close are we to the 1.3?
We are there, and so I just want to put out there, we do have just about 1.3 million available. That pricing was given to us last summer by North Star. That includes adding air conditioning to some sections of the building that are not currently air conditioned. So I am putting it out there that it is possible that Hobbamock Elementary School will have areas of the building that are air conditioned when the other 2 elementary schools do not. So again, something that we can talk about as we work through the logistics and equity across the district. Again, quarterly monitoring, we had February testing done. The February quarterly monitoring was done on Thursday, February 13th. In addition, per our side letter of agreement, there had been some concerns raised and tested for on February 7th. There was materials in an art classroom at Pembroke High School, a stained ceiling tile in our PACE classroom, a window pane in a department head office. All of that was tested on 2/7. At the middle school, there was some stained ceiling tiles and a carpet in a lower level classroom that was brought to the attention of administration in need of testing. And then in addition to the quarterly monitoring happening at Hobbamock, there were 3 carpeted locations in an area behind a bulletin board that staff had identified as concerns. All of that testing has been complete. Per our side letter of agreement, I know you guys are tired of hearing me say that, but our agreement says that we will meet as a collaborative group, administration and the Pembroke Teachers Association, to discuss the results in those reports as well as the recommendation of professionals before we disperse and disseminate those results. It is not helpful for people without the scientific knowledge that Scott and Paul have to be interpreting what those things mean. So our meeting is coincidentally scheduled for tomorrow. So once that meeting happens and we agree as a committee on what the next steps are, we will publish those results to our website as well.
So I have a question on the 2-7 testing. Did we instruct teachers to turn off the HIPAA air handling filters?
No, so you're talking about the quarterly monitoring on 213 at Hobbamuck. As we said a second ago, and you emphasized the point, pretty much every single classroom at Hobbamuck has a hospital-grade air scrubber in it. The purpose of the testing is to get a representative sample of what the classroom looks like when students and staff are in it. Those HEPA filters are running when students and staff are in them. I can understand and appreciate that that is an added level of accommodation that we have in those classrooms, but it is still representative of what it looks like when students and staff are in there. There was a request made that we ask that the filters be shut off before the testing was taken. I did not ask staff to shut off the filters in their room before the test was taken, but it was clear in some of the rooms that were tested on 213 that the machines had been shut off. There is an appendix to the presentation, which I am not going to go through. It gives you a little bit of building history at Hobbamuck, obviously the years of the building, the renovation, the remodel, a little bit about the cement slab construction. I've linked the ASHERA guidelines that talk about air quality in public buildings in relation to relative humidity, temperature, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. I gave you the CDC guidance regarding mold, so there's some frequently asked questions that are posted there, and then the Environmental Protection Agency has come out with a toolkit for schools relative to indoor air quality, so that is posted there as well. So as I said in the beginning, a tremendous amount of work has been happening at Hobbamuck. I understand that people get frustrated and people want to know everything and people want to know more. I assure you that it has been a open communication between ourselves and the Pembroke Teachers Association. A lot of people are doing a lot of work. There's not one thing that was asked for that has not been implemented or considered. Again, not even just from staff, but looking at every recommendation made from every professional from 2016 to date, every single remediation recommendation has been implemented. I really feel like that shows that it is not something that we're ignoring, and it's not something we're saying doesn't exist, but it's something we're constantly working at, and I would expect to be constantly working at indoor air quality in buildings that are 53 years old.
So, it's interesting because I read a social media post like an hour before I came here tonight on, and some of the things that you're being accused of or we're being accused of is obviously not being transparent, and I think it's very clear. I mean, how long have you had the mold testing results on our school website?
So we post them as soon as they're shared with the Pembroke Teachers Association.
So we've had that tab up since 2023, right?
So the tab went up in February of 2024 as a result
okay.
of the conversations that we had at the Health and Safety.
Yeah, so a
Committee.
year. So it's been up there for a year,
Yep,
right?
we add any information that comes up. And, I can appreciate that social media is an avenue that folks use to share their frustration. If you have a question, the best place to go is to the source and ask it. I do read social media because I'm human, right? But it's not an official communication mode for myself or any of the administrators in the district. If you have a question, ask us. Hey, I'm looking for this, I can't find it. Hey, I'm reading it like this, or I have some experience in this. I had a wonderful conversation after the community forum with a gentleman who has a kindergartner at Hobbamuck who actually works in the fire sprinkler industry, and we talked a lot about the condensation on those pipes, the spotting, how that manifests as a stained ceiling tile. I'm interested to hear what other folks want to bring to the table. It has never been something that we're not willing to talk about, and I think you can see from the slides that we've done a lot of talking, we've done a lot of work, but I think the narrative that's out there isn't fair, and I get that life isn't fair, but we have been consistently working on this. Following my traveling circus about roofs in 2011, I never thought there was a topic that I would learn more about. For my own edification, I have also completed 4 of the 7 certification courses for normie certification. I think it's something, if it's something you don't know about, learn about. And I think it's important that we're coming to the table with base level knowledge, but really relying on experts that are experts in this field to make recommendations for us. And as you can see from what I presented, we have taken every single one of those recommendations and implemented them.
Other questions?
Yeah, if I could, just on the record, audience, we've got TV people, whatever. We are fully confident the building is safe and healthy. There's no doubt.
Absolutely,
Perfect.
absolutely.
So here's what I would say to the people that are watching and listening. We've all had kids either in the system, one of the schools, some of the schools, any of the above. I don't think there's one person on this committee, in this administration, whatever, that would put a child, a faculty member, an administrator in an unsafe building. Again, if you have a problem, you think there's a question, please come to us. I'm not human. I don't do Facebook or any of that stuff, so I guess I'm not human. I'm not going to listen to the arguments and the experts and all that stuff. I always tell somebody, you have a question, reach out to me. I will give you my cell number. I will give you my home number. You can do whatever you want. But I will go on the record. I had 2 kids that went through the Pembroke Public Schools. I would not endanger my kids. I would not endanger your kids. So I think that's clear. If somebody thinks we're lying to you, and, you know, they can let us know.
Right, but I think it's important, if you are suspect of it, talk to somebody that's been working on it. You don't have to talk to me. Maybe you don't agree or trust me, but talk to somebody that's from the teachers union side, that's been on the health and safety committee, that's been doing the work. I think those of us that are working on it day in and day out feel like there's a process, feel like there's a protocol, and feel like we are finally in a rhythm for, okay, when something comes up, here's what we do. You know, I think the narrative out there is that when something comes up, we just pretend like it doesn't happen, and that is not the case whatsoever.
It's clearly not the case. I mean, you can see a long documented history of reacting to various things. I just wanted to, another question that came up in that post was about the custodian staff and how they're not mold remediation experts. So can you just address that?
Right, there is not any member of our staff that is a mold remediation expert. There is many times that the recommendation, whether it's from Paul, our tester, from Scott, the union tester, from the Department of Public Health, from Clean Air, that Pure Air that did the assessment in 2020, that increased housekeeping or better general cleaning needs to be happening. So we are not asking the custodians to remove the benches in the 4, 5, 6 wing or replace the rug in the teacher's room. But it is fair to ask the custodial staff to continue to vacuum with HEPA vacuums, to clean in correlation with the guidance for, you know, the products that we use in our district that are all EPA vetted and approved for use in school buildings. But, you know, there was an issue that came up at the high school in September, and there was some deeper cleaning that needed to happen. The Joint Labor Management Committee met and agreed that, you know, something that was identified as a level 1 is something that could be cleaned by our staff with proper training and access to the right products and equipment. I don't think it's out of the realm to ask custodial staff, again, to vacuum, to wipe down hard surfaces. We're talking about wiping down the tile backsplashes in some of our science labs. We're talking about vacuuming some of the exhaust vents in our classrooms. But we did have Paul come in and do an extensive training with our staff at the high school so that they had the right method to clean in a way that was safe. We gave them access to personal protective equipment that included KN95 masks, gloves, coveralls for their clothes. Again,
So what you're saying is the mold remediation experts said it was okay for the custodial staff to clean with the HEPA vacuum and
correct, and the
and
Joint
gave
Labor
instruction.
Management Committee discussed it.
Yeah.
Right, so the custodial unit is also a member of the Pembroke Teachers Association as well. And so I can appreciate there could potentially be a custodian that has a documented asthma issue, and doing this type of cleaning isn't in their best interest. For students and for staff, as you all know, there is a process called a 504 accommodation. If there is something that you need in order to be more successful in your school day or in your work day, we are meeting you where you're at. You come to us, we have a conversation, you provide medical documentation, we implement accommodations. So if there's a staff member that has breathing concerns or has a history of asthma or has a known mold allergen or can't clean with a certain product or can't do outdoor recess during certain seasons because of pollen, we meet everybody where they're at.
Who would a staff member reach out to for, I know for a 504 it would probably be to Jessica for students, but for staff members?
It's Human Resources, Natalie Vanderbilt.
Beautiful,
Hey, Natalie.
just so everybody
Yep.
knows. Thanks, yeah.
And we do have staff that have 504 plans, right?
Yeah.
It's a accommodation that is open to students and to staff.
Other questions?
It's just a comment. This must have taken an extraordinarily long amount of time to put together. So I just wanted to thank you for doing all of that work and everybody that had a hand in putting this together. It's very clear to me that you've been transparent with the information that's been given. and I'm just really thankful for that. You know, my daughter is immunocompromised, and so, you know, I'm one of those families who might be more concerned, and this put me at ease. And that may not be the case for everybody, but it is for me. So I'm just thankful that you went into such great detail, but I am sorry that it came here from some of the issues being communicated that were a little bit different than this. So thank you.
Can this be shared widely, like through
On the
like
website.
Hobamocks?
Yeah, so we can, obviously we'll put it on the webpage. I'm happy to push out in a broadcast email a link to the presentation. And I know that there was some questions about, would you hold a community forum? I'm happy to do that. I'm just not sure that there's any questions that I haven't answered. There's none that I'm not willing to answer.
But
So
isn't
if
this a
somebody
community,
has-
like, isn't this like sort of the same thing? And also to your point, you said you only got one email, and we asked for emails last week, so.
Right,
kind
and
of feels
if
like-
somebody looks at this and has questions, you can reach out to me and ask me anything you want. I just don't know that there's a need for a community forum right now. As I said, a process has been put in place, protocols have been developed. We are working.
Well, I think this is helpful, right? I mean, I do think it was really important to dispel some of the myth and to make sure that what we were putting out there was factual and without bias. I hope we did that anyway, just to make sure the data and the information got out there. And I think that was an important step, because I think parents were becoming concerned, right? They were beginning to worry about the kids, and that's not okay, right? We have to make sure that folks sort of understand what has been done and the timeline in which it's been done and the quickness in which the remediation's been done. Other questions?
Well, I guess just from my, I sat in on, I don't know, half a dozen or however many of these. I am concerned that the information is not being shared directly with you, because that was, and I'm rereading it, because that was definitely what we discussed.
Right, and
in
it's
the
something we have to
meetings.
work on. There hasn't been, 37 reports from the union's tester that I haven't seen. I think there's one or two, right? We're just starting to get into a system of, okay, when something comes up, Paul tests, Scott tests, here's what we do with the information. So I don't anticipate that it'll be a continuing concern, but it is something that has happened in the past. But I feel comfortable addressing it at the Joint Labor Management Group, because that's the purpose of the group. That's what we sat in that room for hours trying to negotiate, and we decided that this group of people should be looking at this, and that is the group of people that should be making that decision.
Exactly, and so that's where, as concerns arise, I hope that it's being presented to the right people and not just on social media, because that's not the way things need to be presented to get fixed. Like, that's not helpful for the joint, committee to be able to address them if people are posting pictures on social media and not, going directly to the purse strings.
Well, I also think too, we have to be really careful, because whether it's the health agent, our tester, the MTA's tester, these folks are scientists that are coming back with factual data, or they should be coming back with factual data. None of us should be disparaging any of those folks. They're simply doing their job at the end
And
of the
to
day.
your point, like, there was a narrative that Lisa, our health agent, came in through the building once a year. Clearly, it's not the case. She's been in constant contact. She's been out here, she's met with the expert in the field, and, it's just not true. She's doing a great job, so.
Yeah, we got to tone down that inflammatory speak to a certain extent, right? We got to get at, to your point, the health and safety of our staff and the health and safety of kids, right? That is really what this should all be about. From what I'm seeing, we're doing everything we can possibly do. I do have one question, though, because it's something that I've heard a couple of times, and that there's chronic dampness. And my understanding is that, and again, I've asked a couple of questions, but God knows I probably know the least about this than anyone at the table. Logic would say if there's chronic dampness, mold would reoccur in the same place around the chronic dampness. Are we seeing that? Is that an issue?
No.
And then my last question, because I've also heard this, is the roof leaking?
So if the word you're saying is roof.
It's a roof for all of us from the Midwest, but
what that word means, but So our roofs were replaced on 4 of the 5 buildings in 2012 going into 2013. What happens on a 52-year-old building when you put a watertight membrane on the roof is that the water finds some other way to get in. So the masonry, the cement, the cinder blocks, all of that mortar is upwards of 40 to 50 years old in some instances. We don't do a lot of preventative maintenance, that is brick repointing or replacing of chip mortar. With that being said, as I said in the beginning, the rooftop units are also 40 years old. The technology associated with air handlers has changed significantly in the past 4 decades. So the rooftop units that we have on top of Hobomok have a series of metal louvers on the side that open up in order to allow outside air into the building. I would love to tell you that they're all functioning 100% of the time. We're able to control them and open and close them from in the building. There are some that don't close at all. If there is sideways rain in Pembroke, which seems to happen here more frequently than you would think, there is water coming in through the rooftop unit. It travels along the edge of the ductwork and it finds a place to come out. It is not the roof leaking. It is a function of either chip mortar, bricks that need to be repointed, or the water finding a way in through our ductwork. You know, some of what I have heard from our results from February is that, you know, when they pop their heads into the ceilings at the middle school in particular, the ductwork is wrapped, but it was wrapped 23 years ago. So maybe we should go back and reinforce some of the tape. Maybe we should, again, as I said, I had a nice conversation with that gentleman, had a kindergartner, and we talked about, do you wrap sprinkler pipes? Like, how much of it is the old construction? How much of it is part of the renovation? And what are the right steps? Because a lot of it is condensation that's happening during the humidity in the summer too. So, no, the roof is not catastrophically leaking anywhere. There still continues to be some concerns with the atrium at Pembroke High School. That is not that. I think some people say it's beautiful. I don't. That section when you come in where there's the stained glass, I guess, I don't know. That was not replaced when the roof was replaced. There's definitely some places where the roof membrane and not abut where there is some leaking that's happening, but it is not a universal issue that's happening across the district.
And the infamous pool that is on top of the roof at Pembroke High School is not leaking. There's no pool on top of that.
The roof at Bryantville was not replaced in 2012.
A couple of blood questions.
Yeah, I'm going to go to that. Ryan, did you have any questions?
I completely believe that there was a pool on the roof. It's like, oh my God, there's a swim team. Now, as captain of the swim team, it is on the roof. It's there every day.
Thank you for coming. Okay,
Also known as the Kingsbury Club.
So if you have questions, I'm going to ask you to come to the microphone, state your name, address, sort of the same type of thing that you would do at town meeting. But now is your opportunity to ask questions. Hold on, just get to the microphone first.
Come all the way
No,
up,
come all the way up, Rhonda.
So everybody knows my name is Rhonda
Yeah.
Rosano, 27 West Elm Street, Pembroke. In regards to your quarterly assessments, is that an independent auditor?
So that is the side letter of agreement with ourselves and the Pembroke Teachers Association is that we would use Paul, our certified indoor environmental consultant, for
Okay.
the quarterly monitoring.
So have you thought about maybe signing a contract with him to lower his costs so that we could possibly, do we have one
We
with
do,
him?
yeah.
We do? Okay, great. One other thing, you have those purifiers within the rooms now for Hobomok. We all know that electricity has gone up, skyrocketed, and now we're paying for those to run, as I understood your conversation with Patrick, or Mr. Chilcott, excuse
That's
me.
okay, too.
That they're running continuously through the night. What has that added to our billing over the?
So we are super fortunate in our 5 school buildings that our electricity is completely supplied by the solar farm. So part of the construction
Fabulous.
of the solar farm took into account the usage of municipal buildings, including the 5 schools. No surprise to anyone, the 5 schools are the biggest user
Yep.
in the town, but we do get all of our electricity is generated from that
Okay.
solar farm.
I thank you for sitting there saying that we can open up for questions and everything like that. I'm just a little bit taken back because your speech earlier saying that we're not at, I'll thank you very much for your time and effort. I know that this is a kind of a thankless job, and I know that you all serve as a committee here. But on top of it, as I stated before, there is a little distrust in regards to what I've seen in regards to how things have played out and how we've been treated, especially myself, and that I don't use social media. I might say happy birthday and stuff like that, but I don't opt to sit there and say, I don't like this one, I can't stand that one. I don't comment on it, but I feel a little bit taken back, and I don't want to wring your ear and sit there and squawk in it, but I thank you for sitting there saying that, Mr. Doyle.
Boyle.
And I might reach out to you as well as Patrick,
Sure.
but I thank you very much for sitting there saying that. It's been a pleasure listening to this tonight, and I thank you for
I
sharing
thought
that.
you were bored, Rhonda. You were stuck in 2016.
What was that?
I thought you were bored with my 2016 information.
No, I just wasn't quite sure how far we were going
Yeah.
back. And
Eternity, yep.
Yeah, I mean, great, but I appreciate it. Again, as I said, Martin, you did a nice job. But thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome,
all.
Rhonda.
I appreciate it.
Other questions? Yeah, just come up to the microphone.
Hi.
Hi.
Nicole
Hi,
Pelletier, 233 West Elm Street. So I guess I just have a couple of questions. So I know you had mentioned, with regards to the roofs and whether or not there would be leaking coming from the roofs. I'm just wondering, so we did get a significant storm in 2015, and I know that was shortly after we had installed new roofing membrane. So I'm just wondering, for lack of a facilities manager, how did we handle that situation where we had like 5 feet of snow on the
Sure.
roofs? And were there any potential issues surrounding how that snow might have been removed?
Sure. So the roofs come with a warranty.
Yep.
Obviously, we're outside the 10-year warranty right now, but in 2015, we were still under the warranty. The roofing contractors did come back and inspect the 4 buildings following that storm. We have a roofing membrane that is not something that you would be shoveling with a metal tipped shovel or putting a snow blower on the roof to do, which are practices that you consistently see across the state when we're moving snow. On top of our buildings are very large exhaust fans as well that is really pumping the air out of the building. So we do get a pretty significant amount of just natural melting that happens pretty quickly after a storm. But in 2015, each of the 4 roofs that were recently replaced were inspected.
Okay. And then with regards to the rooftop units in their current state, is there any consideration for converting them under, say, a Green Communities grant program? It's available like $250,000 a year communities are eligible for.
Yep.
So
So
is
we
that
are
considered?
in Pembroke, a green community, and
Yep.
I work with Town Manager Bill Chenard to identify projects that make sense to kind of pair together between school buildings and municipal buildings. Obviously, Green Communities is looking for the return on your investment, the turnaround time to be around 5 or 6 years. That's not necessarily the case given the price point of an HVAC unit, so it's not super attractive when it comes to those green community projects, but there is some hope. So the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the same organization that gave us the funding, partial funding for the roofs back in 2012, is doing a statewide building check. So they have already been to all of our buildings here in Pembroke to take a look at the state of school buildings in Massachusetts to then decide what is the next logical place for them to invest their funds. The year that we got roofs, it was roofs. They've had boiler projects, they've had window replacement projects. What they're hearing consistently across the state is HVAC is something that there's an interest in them putting together a repair program for.
So it's my understanding that if something falls into disrepair, that we are no longer eligible for some of these grant opportunities. So
Yep.
I guess that's why
Yep,
I was
so,
asking.
yeah.
And then the last thing is would Pembroke Public Schools consider a facilities manager in the future?
So the facilities budget presentation is scheduled for March 18th. We have had that as part of our request for the past several years. Obviously, there is conversations in years where you're cutting staff. Would you be logically adding an administrative role? But is there a more creative way to think about that? And we've talked about, are there some services that we can share with the town, whether it's through technology, through human resources, or through facilities where there's some sort of sharing of a position? So that is definitely something that you'll probably hear about in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Any last questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Katie McPhail, 225 Pelham Street. So I have a couple questions. For the HEPA,
I can't hear you.
for the HEPA scrubbers, are those only at Hobbamock?
So we only have them at Hobbamock. If there is a staff member that has a breathing concern or an allergen on file with human resources, we would absolutely look to adding them to other classrooms in the district. But as I started the presentation with, the air handling system at Hobbamock is different than the other buildings, right? So a univent, like if you went into the classroom across the hall and closed the door, you are maintaining and controlling the amount of exterior air that's brought in, the temperature. It's all coming in and going out through that one system. We don't have that at Hobbamock. So the HEPA filters, some of those ductwork trunks there are pretty long, running from the rooftop unit to the last classroom in a hallway. So again, a little bit different at Hobbamock. But if there was a need from a student or staff, we would absolutely look at adding additional scrubbers to other classrooms in the district.
Okay, and then I saw you had the numbers on there for carpet replacement. Has the carpets been, like, so there was the pictures of the library, and obviously, like Susan had asked, like, it wasn't in the air, but it was on the bench. Have the other carpets been thoroughly tested to see if that is, in fact, on the carpets? Because obviously, like, kids are gross and they roll all over the
Kids are
floor,
definitely
and just
gross.
because it's not in the air, like, they're
Yep,
touching it
so
and putting it all over
a
their
couple of
faces.
times the carpet in the music room was tested. A couple of times the carpet in the teacher room was tested. All of those results are on there as well. There were 3 carpets that were identified as a concern that were tested in February at Hobbamock. So again, as soon as those results are shareable, I will share them. I don't have a carpet in my kitchen. I don't have a carpet in my bathroom. I think that's just good practice. We have a lot of, the teacher's room at Hobbamock where our staff eat is carpeted. It doesn't really make any sense. But again, those are areas that have been tested in the past. The results are on the site and have been tested as most recently as February 7th.
Is the plan to remove all carpeting, so the LIR, the library, like where the kids are, where there's been mold in both those areas?
So, we look for your support at town meeting for that capital article. We don't have a standalone capital article. We are part of the town capital article. So the HVAC, the replacement of the PA system, both at Hobbamock and another school are on there, as well as the carpet replacement at Hobbamock.
Okay, my last question, I know this was asked last year as well. Would it be possible for you, so I think this is all great, and I love that it's on the website, and I personally know it's there and follow it and read it, but it seems like every couple months everybody gets riled up about it being a big secret and nobody knows about it. Would it be possible for you to continuously share that as it happens? So quarterly send out an email that says, this is what we're doing, this is where it is.
Yeah,
so
sure.
that people
I don't
always know, and then also when something comes up, so people know that was found and dealt with, as opposed to all the hearsay.
Yep, and I think it's important to reinforce the connection with the building administrator and the parent community. So, I'm happy to have Ashley communicate with the quarterly results that are shared during the testing, whether there was something or there wasn't something. But I
didn't mean directly from you.
No,
I just
yeah,
meant,
I just
like,
feel
as a
strongly
whole.
that it should be a building connection, right? You all see each other every day, all the time, and it's important that you have open lines of communication. And if for some reason you're frustrated with the information or the timeliness of it, then I'm happy to step in. But yes, moving forward, we can absolutely include the quarterly update with folks, or if something comes up, we can share that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any last questions, as it is getting quite late?
I am going to head out, but I just want to thank you again for having a legislator.
Thanks, Phoebe.
I know that Mr. Boyle was having to get in touch with us.
Great.
I'm going to use the business card on my way out to resend the original file. But thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Okay, so seeing no other questions, I am going to ask that we push the teaching and learning. It's just late.
Fine,
And
Mary Beth.
And we still have
come back next time.
we still have an executive session. Future meeting dates. So we are meeting again on 3/18.
Yes, so 3:18 is a 6 o'clock start time. The school committee will be meeting to start an executive session to hear a level 3 grievance. So the public meeting will start that night at 7:30. Obviously, being cognizant of a later start time, we will adjust the agenda accordingly so that you're still getting some budget presentations. There's a couple of other, there's an Eagle Scout that wants to come and speak
There
to
is.
you.
Yep.
So making sure that we're making accommodations for all of that as we work through.
Patrick, if I may too, for those of you who follow scouting in Pembroke, we just had another young man make Eagle Scout, which 76 in the town, or 77 people, Eagle Scouts in this town. That's amazing. I grew up in a town of 60,000, I knew one. Pembroke has like maybe 20,000. And I'm not saying all 72 or 77 were here at once, but that's an amazing thing. And we have, I'm going to say, students in the pipeline that, I know JT's coming through, the
Yep.
gentleman, Connor
Connor is coming on the
through.
18th. Yep.
We've got 3, 4, 5 more kids in this thing, and they mostly do school projects. Danny Noguer was the arch for the
Yep.
thing. CJ Agnew did the
sign.
sign down front.
We have the Gaga
amazing.
pits.
So, yeah, the Gaga ball pits. I mean, it's something to be proud of. And I know I say this very nicely. You come to these meetings and you see some of the stuff and some of these kids present, and you see a young man like Ryan sitting here. I don't know about you, but when I was a 16, 17-year-old senior in high school, I would have been, shaking in my boots sitting there. We've got some real amazing kids here, and, thank you as parents. But if you had a chance to see some of these kids, give them a shout out. Give them a thank you. It's they've done some great stuff for the schools.
In a few years, we should have some girl Eagle Scouts.
I'm hoping. I am hoping.
That would be nice.
I would be honored to speak at one of those.
And thank you to the educators that are pushing them, because you guys do your part there too. Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion to enter executive session pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy related to collective bargaining, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the legal position of the school committee as declared by the chair.
So moved.
So motion by David, seconded by Allison. By roll call vote, Sue?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Katrina? And I'm a yes. We are in executive session.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
We make a good stuff.
I need to.